Okay, hello, this is Lori, and we're back to another episode 6 of This Week in Flat Earth. And with me is Jonathan the Morgile and Lawrence Wright. And we're back again to continue the discussion. We kind of doing this like a soap opera, just from week to week. We're just sort of picking up where we left off the last time, it appears, and it seems to be working okay. Um, Morgile, you don't have your camera on. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick is it seems this week in Flat Earth, one of the things I want to talk about first, just to get it off the table, is what seemed to consume a lot of people's time this week, and that was the fake Stanley Kubrick hoax film that came out by joke or by yoke. I don't know who was the one that decided how it was going to hit the skids, but I want to touch on it because it consumed a lot of people's time this week, and I want to talk about the relevance of that and why that's kind of important. Not that the film was real or fake, because it's obviously fake. It wasn't Stanley Kubrick. And there's plenty of evidence to show that. Raw footage was found on a couple of different YouTube sites that either was stashed there by accident or on purpose to mislead people into believing that Stanley Kubrick gave I guess what you'd call an 11th hour confession that he had filmed the moon landings, all of them, and gave this interview to this ne'er-do-well director named T. Patrick Murray, and the evidence is conclusive, in my opinion, and in most people who took the time to actually delve into all of the raw footage, that is not Stanley Kubrick, and he didn't make this confession, and it didn't happen in 1999, 3 days before he died. So the relevance of that is that, in my opinion, they were trying to dupe the conspiracy theory movement, the conspiracy truth movement, and make us all look very gullible, as if we'll fall for anything, and also probably to make himself a name, a la what was his name, H.G. Wells, and the War of the Worlds or whatever. So you guys, I want to hear your take on what you think that was about, and what you think about the timing of it being released right now. I know there's a movie, Moonwalker, I believe that's the name of it, coming out shortly. So tell me what you think.
Well, I've seen some pretty good evidence, and it makes a lot of sense that the argument of Stanley Kubrick being responsible for directing a lot of the NASA movies that we're all familiar with, like the Apollo missions, for example. So I think that's a good possibility. Somebody had to direct those films, and it just so happens that Kubrick already had sort of this technique and the means and the know-how to film very realistic space stuff from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so that makes a lot of sense, but for someone to come out with a totally contrived bullshit story, maybe if they put the disclaimer out there, this is just for fun, it's not supposed to be real, but for someone to try to pass that off as being true is a disservice to the truth, because now, from this point forward, the Stanley Kubrick moon landing hoax is all going to be a hoax. And so, I just think it's important, if we're going to do a video that's for fun, to put the disclaimer first, because if it's all bullshit, then it makes the whole thing look stupid, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the idea that it's kind of a catch-22 in the way that it was tricked out. This film footage was used first couple of times that it was released out there in these little 30-minute, catch it now while you can. Here's the login, on Godlike Productions or wherever that this was plopped, and the whole idea was that the editing was like so schizophrenic that you weren't able to discern much of anything because there were all these other clips and noises and music and edit cuts. That's why they did it that way, I'm assuming, so that you wouldn't have an opportunity to really hear very well or tell if that was Kubrick. The lighting was awful. It was from one side. Excuse me, from one side. And then a few people found the unedited version of the raw footage stashed away a few places here and there, and then started to listen. Then it was obvious that the Stanley Kubrick guy was an actor. The director calls him Tom several times. Someone, may think that they're talking to someone off camera, but he definitely was coaching this actor. And he was also telling him what to say, how to say it, what to focus on, so on and so forth. What do you think, Lauren?
If they put that on, if that was available for us to see, then it's obviously been contrived. That's why they put it there. I think it's like one of these double bluffs. So you say it's a bluff, and then they produce one, which is obviously a bluff. They want people to think that the whole thing is a big bluff, and Kubrick had nothing to do with it. They made another video a few years ago, which was very entertaining, and it had got Henry Kissinger in it and Donald Rumsfeld in it. I don't know whether you've seen that one.
Yes, I have.
And that was a similar one. But that was obviously a spoof. But they got Kissinger and Rumsfeld to take part in it, so it just makes you think, doesn't it? It probably is all true, but because they've done it in a way that makes it look like a bluff, people may think it's just all a big bluff.
Well, at the end of the day, we don't even need it to be true, because we don't need Stanley Kubrick to tell us that the moon landings were faked. Whether he filmed them or not is irrelevant at this point, because everyone has ripped them to shreds. All of the film, all of the documentation supposedly that was supposed to have happened at the day and the time. I mean, it's bogus looking in and of itself. So.
Well, the other thing too, it's like you get these red herring arguments where, like, okay, here's an example: the Flat Earth Society, that one of their red herring arguments involves the Earth accelerating upwards at 9.8 meters per second, and that's what gravity is, right? And so if someone can debunk that red herring argument, they think they've debunked the flat Earth because, oh, well, Admiral Byrd didn't run into a dome, so therefore the flat Earth doesn't exist, right? It's that kind of red herring debunking that people are trying. It's really rampant. But you see these red herring arguments in all sorts of conspiracies, and yeah, so that's exactly what, to me, this Stanley Kubrick thing is. It's another red herring where somebody's going to debunk it, right? And then from that point forward, half the people that look into this idea are going to say, bah, that was debunked by such and such, and they're not going to look any further because that's how people do research. They just sort of get the opinions of others, and they call that research. So, yeah.
Exactly. And the whole idea is it's a hoax of a hoax of a hoax. I mean, it's like that infinity loop thing, which came first, the hoax or the hoax. And so, but anyway, I don't want to belabor that whole thing a whole lot, because I also took some heat this week because I posted some of the raw footage that I found on one of the websites, the PlayStation channel, I guess it's called, on my channel, on this channel, and called it the hoax of the century. But the hoax of the century was, in fact, the faked moon landings. So the whole thing got me either, way to go, you debunked the hoax, or you're giving this way too much attention, and you shouldn't give this any attention whatsoever, because all you're doing is you're making it more important than it actually ever was, and it's a shame to run Stanley Kubrick's name through the mud. And it's like, people, I didn't run Stanley Kubrick's name through the mud. I happen to think he was a brilliant director and filmmaker. But I'm here to say that is not Stanley Kubrick. So how could we be running his name through the mud if it's not even him in the film? Okay, he died in 1999, irrespective of the fact that this guy says he made this film. The guy also in the dialogue of the making of the film mentioned about Bart Sibrel, and I believe he says that Bart Sibrel got punched, and hello, that didn't happen until 2002. So how could this interview have happened in 1999, 3 days before Stanley Kubrick died? So it's all horse shit, and it needed to be debunked, and it is, but that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that the moon landings were a hoax. The moon landings were faked, and not just the first one, but all of them. And some of the things that the actor in this thing, some of the things he said were true. It just so happens it's not Stanley Kubrick saying it, so it doesn't have any weight anyway. But it has no bearing on the fact that most conspiracy theorists who believe that the moon landings were faked still believe it. Nobody stopped believing it just because of that film. So the next thing I want to talk about, since it sort of I sort of prompted this today, and I posted in the FlatEarthConspiracy.com Facebook group. It's a closed group, so you can't go and read it unless you're a member, but I posted in there once again that I wanted to continue the discussion about the difference between the firmament and the dome, and I'm talking about the actual words firmament and dome. Okay, they are not the same word. They are not derived from the same word. And
Laurie, have you got your camera on there?
Do I have my camera on?
Yes, I have.
I can see you, Laurie.
Oh, you're on now, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just one at a time.
Okay. So I posted a question to people and sort of a statement, and wanted to know, how this dome firmament word association was working into the Flat Earth movement and the Flat Earth community. And without prompting you guys about what the discussion turned out to be and who said what or any of that stuff, I would like your take on when you think of the Flat Earth vernacular, the words we're using, because everybody ends up having a common language, a common vernacular, and so nomenclature maybe is the better word. What do you think? What do you associate when you blink your eyes and you think about the dome? What do you see in your head? Okay, when you think dome, sky dome, earth dome, flat earth dome. And then what do you think about firmament?
A big red cross going through it, like a big red X, like incorrect, wrong, but that's just me.
Okay, so yeah. What do you think about the fact that, Jonathan, when you got into the Flat Earth movement or started doing your research, how much was this word dome a part of the concept? And the same with you, Lawrence. I want you to answer this question, and I want you to tell me how long ago you got in, and how strong the commentary was about the word dome, not firmament. Yeah, dome.
The dome never came into it at all.
Yeah,
when I started looking a couple of years ago, the dome just wasn't mentioned. There was talk of the glass ceiling, yeah, but as what's her name? Kristen, who was going to come on tonight, Kristen Wolf, she made quite an interesting comment saying just because there's a firmament or a ceiling, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's walls as well. So you can have a firmament, it doesn't necessarily mean there's some partition walls coming down to bring it down to the ground to enclose us in that way. And I think it is actually glass. I know because they found this Libyan glass. And the reason I think it's glass, I'll show you later, is because planet Earth needs ozone. We would all be dead very soon without the ozone. Now, most people think ozone is a finite amount, because you hear all these reports of we're destroying the ozone layer, but ozone is made continuously and is used up continuously. It's basically made by the sun breaking down oxygen from O2 to O1, which then clumps together to make O3, O4, O5, which is unstable oxygen. They call it ozone. And if you look at the manufacture of ozone machines, you have a plate of glass with an electric charge on, and then you have another plate. It could be made of something else. It could be made of plastic. It could be made of, it could be made of earth. And then that's fitted into the machine. It's high voltage, and that produces the ozone. It also produces, interestingly, a purple glow, and I'll show you that later because I've got an ozone machine down here. So I'll turn the lights down and let you take a look at this, which sort of leads into another thing with all these northern lights. And I'm going off at a tangent here a bit. If you'll see the northern lights, you see all these beautiful colours. And that resembles the colours that you get when you pass an electrical current or some electromagnetic current through gases. So ozone gives you like a violet colour, neon gives you red, helium gives you yellow, argon gives you blue. I'm not sure whether all these gases are lighter than air, but we know that helium is. So all the world's helium, helium balloons, it all ends up going up at the top. And then you get an electrical charge passing through it, and you're going to get these colours happening when that happens. So that may well be the reason for the northern lights. It could be, lightning or something passing through these gases, causing these colours. But I think personally, the firmament is totally flat. It just goes over the top as like a pane of glass, and it's not a upturned dish that comes over as like a bowl, because I think God or the Creator is a lot more sophisticated than to make something mechanical like that to hem us in. I think He's got a far more sophisticated model than that.
Well, the funny thing is too, I think that the nomenclature already exists, sort of hidden within our existing vocabulary, and so when you think about things like the astral plane and the physical plane or the plane of existence, that's, those words already exist, and if you say astral plane, somebody can know exactly what you're talking about. But and it works very nicely in the flat Earth model, where it doesn't really work in the infinite space model. As far as the dome goes, I think that there's very conclusive evidence to show that the dome, if there is any dome, is an electromagnetic field, and more specifically a toroidal electromagnetic field, and probably something like a vortex. But to say that that is a physical object in the sky, I think is irrational, and to point to the Bible as proof of that is actually incorrect, because the word firmament used in the King James Bible, and I don't want to hammer this point into the ground, we've already talked about it, but firmament was translated from rock or rakia, which just simply means expanse. So from taking expanse to firmament that's a mistranslation in my humble opinion, and also according to Strong's Concordance. So and there's other verses where it talks of the sky like a tent, but if you actually look at the original word, instead of tent, it was a word that could be used to describe fine powder or a thin veil. And so, the Bible's talking about a firmament or a physical dome in the sky it just doesn't. It certainly is a flat Earth book, but it's not a Truman Show dome book either. And one point that I think is really important to make is that we shouldn't use the Bible to prove or disprove the shape of the world anyway, because it was well known back then that it was a flat Earth, and so they weren't trying to prove it one way or another. I don't even think they were aware that it was something that needed to be proved, because it's so obvious to a basic fundamental observer.
Okay, Lawrence, show us your ozone making machine. I saw you moving around there, and I muted your microphone because you were purpling the screen.
Just a second.
Okay. So
but this is, for me, it's a really big clue as to the construction of where we're living. because this mimics what's happening. The construction of one of these machines is just a small version, in my view, as to what's happening. There we go. So, do you see the purple glow? Do you see that, John?
I see the purple glow in your room.
No, I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah.
It's
That's the
probably
purple
my
glow.
computer.
That's the purple glow, and that's the electrical charge breaking down oxygen into ozone. So you can smell it.
Yeah,
I'll turn it
I
off now.
personally don't like the way ozone smells, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to when this term dome, actually, you know, maybe it's just because it's a short word instead of having to say a 3-syllable word like firmament. I don't know, but if you Google images of the word dome, you're going to get a football field dome. If you Google images of Sky Dome, you're going to get some football field, and you're going to get a few of the flat Earth, you know, domes over the top of a circle Earth. But as you add more words to the search, regardless, you're getting this shape of an upside down turned bowl or terrarium bowl, however you want to call it. You get that picture in your head, and so that word is very important as it's being bandied around in the flat Earth movement. But what's more important is I'm watching the evolution of the videos and the dialogue go from trying to describe this firmament dome to just simply using the word dome. We live in a Truman Show dome. That's what Mark Sargent says. I hear other video makers say, I've heard Dubé say we live in under a dome.
Well, not only that, you know, Eric Dubé, he will say that there's a possibility that it's an infinite plane, or I like to say that it's probably somewhere in between a dome and infinite, and you really can't go wrong with that answer. I lean towards probably not a dome, for sure, but I believe, and I'm not going to speak for Eric Dubé, but I've seen enough of his stuff to tell you that most of the time when pressed, he says he doesn't think that it's infinite. He thinks it's probably an enclosed system. Now, again, maybe he's changed his mind on that, or maybe his mind is still open. But yeah, there's a lot of people that have made their mind up that there is a dome, and to me that's a big problem, because I have never seen evidence for a physical dome, not biblical or empirical. But the problem is if somebody proves conclusively that there is no dome, then you've lost whatever percentage of the flat Earth movement, because they're fixated on this dome. So that's why I like to use common sense, logic, and the scientific method, as opposed to my feelings when I subscribe to a model.
Okay, so let's just suppose that there is not a natural, organic reason why the flat Earth community has adopted and started using freely this word dome. We live under a dome. It's a circle with a dome over the top, and the sun and the moon go around the inside of the dome. I mean, they say it so matter-of-factly that if you're new to the flat Earth information, I didn't hear that information put quite that way when I first got involved 9 months ago. I may have heard the word dome, and I'm pretty sure the only person I heard it from at the time was Sargent, but at the same time, everybody was still really guessing on how the sun and moon and the circular map and the AE map and all of this stuff was sort of falling into place. And then suddenly it became, no, that's it. That's the accepted flat Earth model. And I'm like, who accepted by who? Mm-hmm. Who voted to accept that model as the model that we're going to, I don't want to use the word sell, but market to unknowing flat Earth, people unknowing of the flat Earth concept or theory.
One thing I would add is that general consensus certainly doesn't equate to truth. And oftentimes you'll find that general consensus is actually the opposite of truth. And so we need to be very careful not to just sort of follow the herd in their thinking and just, do the experiments for yourself and come to your own conclusions. But that is a big problem because what I've found is most of the time, whomever convinces somebody of this for the first time has a huge impact on how that person will view the world from that point forward, and it's very much true. And I'll just give you an example. Robert Sungenis, who's one of the probably the most popular geocentrists there is, he also believes the Earth is a ball, but he believes it's a stationary ball where it's the center of the universe. But he was shown this by an astronomer friend of his, a PhD in astronomy. This is what he says. And of course, the astronomer was a heliocentrist who believed the Earth was a globe, but he had concluded that there was no way that we could observe what he was observing if the Earth was a spinning globe. And so Robert Sungenis sort of, it seems to me, took that essence of the astronomer's worldview with him even to this very day, or even until until Jaron did the show with him. But so, yeah, I mean, that applies certainly to Mark Sargent, and I'm not going to bash on him, but he brings out a lot of red herring arguments, whether he does that intentionally or not, and whatever that means, that's up to each individual. But if you're going to bring up red herring arguments and tie them as integral parts of your model, that's a big problem. Specifically, a dome. Or, another example of how a red herring argument can be sort of used to label a thing to discredit it is the airplane flights conundrum. And I would describe that as being the east to west flights having identical duration is a huge conundrum that doesn't work on a globe. But Mark Sargent's airline conundrum is the planes that fly from Santiago to Sydney, right? And people are claiming they can make those flights, and what that proves to me is that the maps are wrong, but what that also proves is that Mark was probably pushing out a falsity as a proof, and that's a problem. But also now if somebody says, oh, the airlines conundrum, well, they're going to equate that to the one that's been debunked and not the one that actually shows that the Earth couldn't possibly be spinning at any rate whatsoever. And so that's sort of that really applies to the Stanley Kubrick thing, because now, 10 years from now, somebody's going to say, oh, have you heard about the Stanley Kubrick's filming the moon landing hoax? And that person will be like, yeah, they already debunked it. They already debunked the flat Earth because Mark Sargent was wrong. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You can't find curvature and the thing isn't spinning. That's how simple it is. But now, it's been debunked because Mark Sargent was wrong about a point. It doesn't,
Okay, well, let me ask you this: what would be the reason to I'm gonna get shot no matter what I say or what words I use or how I couch it. So I'm just gonna say it the way Lori Frary talks. Okay, if there's an infiltration of this into this flat Earth movement by those who want to direct or steer the movement to a certain or specific agenda and belief system, so that when the big debunk happens, they can clear it. It's like going to the bowling alley and hitting a strike. Okay, you get everybody with one bowling ball, and so I have an innate fear of that because of what I've seen happen in other aspects of different truth movements, with whether it was 9/11 or JFK or whatever, and so or Occupy, any of these. And so let's just extrapolate how easy it would be to repeat a term and just keep saying it and saying it and saying it until most people just give up. We're not that far away from having been brainwashed anyway. We're not that far away from having had propaganda fed to us our entire lives. They know we're waking up. They know the flat earth movement is growing. They saw it coming before it ever really even got rolling because of the way that they can collect data.
Well,
And
they saw it coming because the world is flat and stationary, so they, you know,
they knew sooner or later, with all of the technology that they gave us to play with to keep us occupied, that sooner or later we'd take those same toys and we'd start using them for whatever we wanted to use them on, and by accident or by whatever, we would discover, oh my God, look at that, the earth is flat too. Okay, so all I'm trying to do with people say, God, you're obsessed with this dome thing. I'm not obsessed with anything. What I'm alarmed about is that how easily it could happen that we could be funneled via gatekeepers and gatekeeper information to believing and having a consensus about something that is not true.
Definitely.
John, can I take something up with you, mate?
Sure.
You know, because we're not going to agree on anything, and there's something that you've put out that I disagree with, and it seems like you're falling in line with what all the other guys are doing. So I've looked into this azimuthal equidistant map, and it isn't a map, it's just a means of finding a central point and then making everything that surrounds it an accurate distance from the center point. So the one that's been bandied around, you just take a globe and you just squash it down flat, and then you've got the North Pole in the center and the continents in the middle and the South Pole around the edge. So the distances from the center to other points are going to be accurate, but the distance between points that are not on the center, the land masses are going to be heavily distorted, and the distances are going to be completely wrong. So my bone with you is that you featured that thing with Drew treble 7 or Drew 8 7s, but that was superimposed on the AE map, and if you've read any of the stuff I've posted on that, the AE map is hopelessly wrong, and they're not even actually a map. They are not used by navigators in any shape or form. No navigators use them at all, because they're wholly wrong. They're just the Gleason map, because you missed the show last week. I looked into the Gleason map and got into some discussions on Facebook, and one guy went and dug out the patent for it. Now that Gleason map is not actually a map of the world. It's registered as a time-keeping device, and there are fingers that go around it. They've mostly been broken off, but you use these fingers to work out the time in the local time in different parts of the country, using Greenwich Mean Time as the starting point, and you just use the angle and you apply some figure to it, and it'll give you the local time. So I was wondering why you were using that AE map in a model when it's hopelessly wrong. I mean, because you took the data.
I see what you're saying. I think the purpose of using that demonstration had more to do with how light behaves than it did about the map being an accurate representation of the ground. And that's something that I'll come right out and say right off the bat is I don't think we have any accurate maps, and for a few reasons. The Mercator projection map is basically what we still use. Okay, and the Mercator projection map is admittedly inaccurate. In fact, wildly inaccurate, to the point to where if you're at the equator, it's somewhat a realistic depiction of the ground below. But the further north or south you go of the equator, it's admitted that the Mercator projection starts to skew things in an increasing degree up until it gets to the poles, where it literally stretches out the same point on the poles to infinity, so the entire length of the map. So that right there proves that the Mercator projection is wrong, and the reason that I think the Gleasons and the azimuthal, the reason I've always thought they were wrong is because they look similar to the Mercator projection, which it couldn't possibly look anything like the Mercator projection in reality. I think that if you were able to pan back far enough and get an actual snapshot of the face of the world, you would see something totally, you wouldn't recognize it. And I think it's important for cartographers to start making accurate maps based on a flat Earth model, as opposed to taking what was already done for the globe Earth and trying to put the pieces back together from a globe, because you're never going to get it. You have to start from square one with the data, because the data's there. All of the distances are there, but the problem that we have is everyone assumes the Earth is a globe, which causes all sorts of wild problems in any map you make from that standpoint. So with all that being said, at the same time, if we have things like a 24-hour sun in the Antarctic, then that's an issue if it's actually true. I'm not convinced that's actually true or not 100%, but even
can I just interject there, John, on that, on the Antarctic sun, because you missed last week's show, and I did some research. I was looking for over a week at the Casey station in Antarctica, where they've got a webcam, and I was taking screenshots and working out where the sun was to actually create the shadows. And at that station, you've got shadows north, south, east, and west. So, you know, you're saying it's a pseudo sun. What is the difference between what's happening in Antarctica and the Arctic? Because I can't see any difference.
Well,
why
there's a big difference. First of all, you can find the one shot that I found of the so-called 24-hour sun in the Antarctic looks very, very fake to me. It looks like it's been put together in a software program. It really doesn't look real. Now, you can find a ton of time-lapse footage of the northern 24 hours of sun, and what you'll see is the sun basically going all the way around the observer, kind of rising and falling, but never going beneath the horizon. And that alone right there proves that the sun is going around us, that we're not going around the sun, because what you would see is you'd see the sun going back and forth in the sky. You wouldn't see it going all the way around you if you were actually the one spinning.
All right. Let me ask you a question, John. How can you have shadows in every direction?
Well,
how do you get shadows north, south, east, and west without a sun to create the shadow?
Wait, let him finish his thought.
Yeah, what I was going to say is let me just finish the one point though, and in terms of the Drew 777 whatever, in terms of his video, I use that because it shows based on data that the light could actually go all the way around the outside of a dome. But again, I'm not talking about a dome, I'm talking about a toroidal electromagnetic field, which makes it all the more interesting because there's tons of evidence for that already existing. It's just the problem is, you know, obviously it doesn't exist on a globe, it just exists as sort of the top half of a toroid emanating from the North Pole and going all directions out to the south. But one final thing, though, I submit that there could be an Antarctic continent, and maybe it's not necessarily wrapped around all the way the outside. And I guess what I'm saying is you might be able to just keep going in the sea in one direction, possibly. But from what I gather, if you go anywhere south from a southern point, no matter where you are in the world, you're going to end up in an icy wasteland. And so that's what I'm going to believe at this point. Well, how do
you know there's an ice wall around the Earth? John?
Yeah.
How do you know there's an ice wall around the Earth? Because, as I said before, the AE map is completely wrong. It's just a squashed down globe which makes the Antarctic appear on the outside. How do you know that's right?
Because if you go south from any point, you wind up in an icy wasteland. So, and it makes sense.
How do you know that, then? You don't know that.
Well, yes, you do, Lawrence. You know that if you take off from the tip of Chile, or I mean South America, or the tip of New Zealand, or the tip and go south, you always run into ice.
Yeah, but they're saying if you, like John will be saying, if you go north of the North Pole, you'll hit another patch of ice that's the South Pole. But we don't know that because nobody's done it.
Well,
we've got no evidence.
I'm saying you wouldn't do that. That's the whole thing. The Mercator projection was designed with the concept of circumnavigation only working in east to west fashion. Even then, back in the 1500s, they knew that you couldn't circumnavigate north and pop out at the, go around to the south, and so that's why the Mercator projection was done as a cylindrical map, as opposed to, if I were going to take a sphere and map out the face of it, I wouldn't wrap it around a cylinder like the way they did. I would, do it like the azimuthal equidistant, like the Gleasons. That's how they've done it. But I think we're starting at the wrong point on all those maps because they all, at the fundamental core of the mapping, they assume the Earth to be a sphere and extrapolate everything out from that. crux.
John, what I'm saying, John, is that these maps that people are using in the models, you know, Eric Dubé's and Rob Skiba's, the AE map is not a map of the world. They are tools, they are devices to measure distances,
Yep.
yeah, or
Exactly.
to measure time. They're not maps of the world, but they're using them as though they are a map.
Well, but
So
we have
there's
to
no
have
evidence
some
that they're surrounded by
Well,
ice.
what are you going to use to make a model from, Lawrence, if you don't have anything to start from as the basis? So what you're saying is we can't make any models until we make a map that's correct.
But when you know one's completely wrong, when you know it's completely wrong, why would we use it? You know, you need to get one that's half decent. I mean, John, let me ask you, John, about the matching night and day everywhere. So if you look at 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south, on their respective summer solstices, they've got equal amounts of daylight. Now, you're not going to get that on the AE map. It's impossible. But in reality, you do. So wherever you look on a map, you can go and check it out on time and day. You look at somewhere 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south, 40 north, 40 south, the poles. If you look at the North Pole now, total darkness. Look at the North Pole in the summer, 24 hours light. And if you look at the South Pole now, you've got 24 hours light, and in the North Pole, 24 hours darkness. One is a mirror image of the other, 6 months apart. That does not work on the AE map in any shape or form. So why are people still using it?
Well, no, but see, that's the thing, though. They're not. They're
well,
really.
But wait a minute. It does work if you've got 24 hours of sun in summer on the circular map. That's the problem. People are making it fit. People are making what they're observing fit the map rather than make the map that fits the observations.
You would never get 24 hours of daylight on the outer ring. If you look at the size of the sun, it's only going. I did a diagram on it. It lights up. You look at the diagrams that Rob Skiba and Eric Dubé go out. You've got the sun on its most outer circuit down at Capricorn. Yeah, and on those models, it's lighting 1/7 of the outer perimeter. That's the most it's ever going to light up, which means it's only going to light up the South Pole for about 3.5 hours a day. But it's lit up for 24 hours a day now. So the map is hopelessly wrong.
Yeah, I think the maps are definitely wrong, but I disagree with you that they're identical, that the 24-hour, you know, the solstice or whatever are identical in the north and the south poles.
What evidence have you got? I've got evidence that what I'm saying is correct. I've checked. If you take time and date as correct, and I do because I check my own time here, and it matches perfectly, then it's symmetrical wherever you go. You go 10 degrees north, 10 degrees south. They've got matching summer solstice longest days. All of them. Not just some of them, all of them. That's impossible on the AE map.
Right.
Okay.
And, you know,
okay,
and again,
so
I think that it's an issue with me to assume that what we observe as the sun is actually a physical object, the sun. I think that what we're observing is light passing through electromagnetic fields at different angles throughout the year, and we have different, you know, consequences of that here on the ground. But at the same time, you know, I just don't. First of all, the northern polar area, you can find all sorts of videos, time-lapse videos of the solstice. They're very easy to find. On the other hand, for the south, it's not the case. In fact, the only one I've ever seen looks very fake. So I have an issue with that. But also, you know, and we've mentioned this before too, twilight behaves completely differently in the north than the south. The south is far colder by average and by record than the north. Also, the barometric pressure decreases as you travel from north to south, and it keeps decreasing all the way south of the equator and keeps decreasing. So there's not this bilateral symmetry in terms of the hemispheres. There's a perceived, you know, similarities, but I disagree. I don't think there's a perfect bilateral symmetry between the two. You know, there's observations that lead me to believe otherwise.
Okay, so as to not be an argument, because not that I'm trying to keep an argument from happening, but if there's evidence that there's sun visible for a day, all day in the southern in Antarctica, and it proves out that this is true based on, you know, whatever data you're getting it from, time date or whatever, or these camera feeds that, uh-oh, we lost Lawrence. These camera feeds, then perhaps one of the other elements isn't true, that the ice ring goes all the way around the perimeter of this circular map, okay? Maybe one of these elements, you know, it's like those puzzles you used to play when you were a kid, and they'd have a dog, a dog, a dog, and a cat. Which one of these doesn't go? Okay, the cat. So maybe there's one of these elements that's not quite fitting in to the puzzle very well. And Lawrence, you're back.
Oh God, yeah, I think there was a bad connection there.
Okay. So what I was just saying is maybe one of the things that we're Lawrence, you're in here twice now. You're going to have bad
Really?
bandwidth. Yeah, there's a second Lawrence showing up on the screen. Can you see it down there? Your blue person?
Yeah. Is it
Okay.
causing
You have two connections going simultaneously, so you need to drop one of those out. Okay. There we go. Now that's good. That's good.
Okay. All right.
What I was trying to say is perhaps one of these things does not fit the puzzle. Maybe there isn't an ice wall all the way around, and maybe there is light in some place in Antarctica all day long in their summertime. Maybe we're adding too many elements together, and that's where the confusion is coming in.
Yeah, but Laurie, there's webcams all around the perimeter of Antarctica, wherever it may be. There's 12 webcams, and all 12 of them are currently showing 24 hours daylight.
And I hear you saying that, but what I'm saying is maybe those 12 webcams are not all the way around this circle. Maybe they're all the way around a different circle somewhere, or some elongated bottom of the map or something. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
maybe maybe they're not all dotted around the circle on the outside.
How can you get shadows in every which direction?
That's one of the ways, is the fact that the sun is bouncing off of something or some atmospheric condition of a smaller Antarctica that doesn't go all the way, or the part they're showing us cameras from. You see, they could be playing a double blind game here, Lawrence. That's what I'm trying to say.
Why aren't they considering the option that the map that they're using is incorrect?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Well, obviously you can't have 24 hours sun on the azimuthal equidistant map, which isn't a map.
The reason
with an ice ring all the way around the outer edge.
Right. But you could on other maps. You could get 24 hours daylight on other types of maps.
The reason I use it is because...
All right, let Jonathan talk. You're talking over him because you're louder.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, not to interrupt, but I was going to say the reason I use it is because I'm not a cartographer, and that's the best one I can find. I've actually tried to, remap out the azimuthal, but again, the fundamental problem with it is it's based on globe logic, and we can't have that. We need cartographers to take the data and go with the assumption first and foremost that the Earth isn't a globe, and then see what it looks like mapped out on there, because the distances and sizes work in both models, but we still don't have an accurate depiction of what this place looks like that we've lived on all our lives.
Okay, so what do we need to do? Have a GoFundMe to raise...
Hang on a minute. Look, Mercator, he made this map in 1569, and the sailors have managed to navigate using that map, so it can't be that far out, can it? They used it for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it works for navigation, but it's not an accurate.
In the 1800s, they used the Mercator map to get from A to B, so it's got to be better than the AE map. So why are you using it? It's not even a map. Why are you using that AE map? Go and look it up. Read what it says. It says it's wildly distorted anywhere away from the centre. I can get an AE map in South Carolina where you live, John. I showed one to Laurie, put it on the page. An AE map based in Sarasota. They're hopelessly distorted. All the distances between 2 points away from the centre are wildly inaccurate. And
Okay, Lawrence. I have the only conclusion that I think we can do at this point, and not continue to, because you're making my blood pressure go up. Okay, we need to raise money to hire a cartographer. Okay, so a real person who does map making. We need to have a GoFundMe. I'll set it up if everybody will try to promote it, and we'll raise money to hire an official cartographer to use all the data that we supply, AE maps, Mercator maps, 1500 BC maps. I don't care.
You'd actually have to look at the survey data, because that's where you start. That's how you base your map making, is on survey data. But what you have to do is you have to have a model to apply that data to. So if your model is a sphere, then you apply that data to a sphere. If your model is a plane with the north and the center, then you apply that data to a plane with the north and the center, and you're going to get two really, really different things. And again, that's the main issue I have with all the maps, because they're based on the Mercator projection, which assumes the Earth is a globe. But I also think that Mercator was a flat earther, because he came out with a flat Earth map, and because the Mercator projection is only circumnavigable from east to west. So that, to me, I strongly suspect that Mercator was a flat earther.
Okay, so let's go back to these. Let's go back just for a minute. There's one thing that's always confused me and bothered me about the globe map in and of itself, and that is the fact that almost everything's on one face of the globe, and the other face of the globe has nothing but water and some islands dotted here and there. Okay, and we know those islands are there because people have sailed to them, so you can't just go, well, you know, maybe all that's fictitious, everything that's in that water part on the backside of the Earth. But that's one good way to hide expanses of water, is to put it on this globe. And
either that or hide expanses of land. I suspect that it's very possible that there may be a whole continent that we're not aware of that's being hidden. Now, am I saying that's the case? No, but I think it's possible, because the known flight routes and the known trade routes are there, and then you have this other area that is
completely and utterly avoided at all costs. They even have shipping lanes that if you get outside of, you're going to run into somebody in security, whether it's, you know, somebody's Coast Guard or military or something that goes, you know, no, you can't come this way. Okay?
Totally.
All right, let me ask you another question. I've got you here now. Laurie, John, equatorial sundials. Please, both of you, tell me why you think we have equatorial sundials. Why do we need them? Why do they even exist? So you, Laurie, first. Equatorial sundials, tell me about them.
Well, it's one thing I haven't checked into, because I just, you know, we each have our own thing that interests us and gets us, you know, excited and willing to do the research. So I've kind of been leaving that to you, Lawrence, because
John,
I figured at some point you were going to do it. But let me say before you jump past me that I think the term and the vernacular equator, Tropic of Cancer, and Tropic of Capricorn are globe terms and do not affect or apply, or shouldn't even be applied to a flat Earth. That's me.
Well, you've got the symmetry on the on time and date, so the relativity to each other is symmetrical. But let me,
Okay.
John, tell me about equatorial sundials. What do you understand them to be?
Yeah, and I did get the links that you sent previously, and I looked into them a little bit, because you know, sundials work pretty much consistently in the northern hemisphere, and then the equator it causes some issues because the sun you know, behaves differently in that center area, and that center area applies to the globe Earth, and it also applies to the flat Earth. So it's essentially the same principle in either model. I don't see what the issue is exclusive to the flat Earth.
The issue is that, you know, if we had a sun that was circling the Earth, then a conventional sundial that was flat to the ground, it would work anywhere on the Earth. But the fact is, when it's directly overhead between Capricorn and Cancer and the equator in the middle, depending on the time of year, when it's directly overhead, when the sun comes in the morning, you get a long shadow. It doesn't move around the sundial. It moves in a straight line till it vanishes at noon, and then it extends and lengthens in the afternoon. It does not move round the dial. And the only conclusion you can draw from that is that the sun is traveling in a straight line.
Yeah, I mean that's what it appears.
Or the spotlight of the sun is traveling in a straight line.
Yeah, but all the leading flat earthers are telling us a different story. They're telling us.
Did you hear what I just said, Lawrence? The pinpoint of the sun is moving in a straight line.
Well, what I would say is that let's just say the matrix of reality is curved. If you're an observer that's basically bound to that matrix of reality, you're going to see something following a curve as a straight line. And so, you know, that's sort of my perspective on this, is that we are inadequate observers to really hash through what the sun is and what the sun's doing, because all of our experiences are based on this matrix of reality that is curved all sorts of ways, it would appear. But, you know, as intelligent beings, we've sort of figured out a way to make sense of things in a linear fashion. But, you know, I wouldn't equate how, you know, our observations of light as any further conundrum than it is, because it's a big mystery to me in terms of what the sun is and what we observe in terms of light waves. How does that equate to the source of light? And, you know, I'm not convinced one way or another in terms of what the sun is. I am convinced that it's not helium and hydrogen, though.
Okay, Lawrence, I have something for you, okay?
Or not atomic fusion of helium and hydrogen, I should say.
Okay. Several years ago, I bought a big flat screen TV, okay? Back when they were like $5,000 for this big giant box that had these 3 projector light bulbs inside and had a mirror on the back, and it had a screen in the front that I did not know was triple layers of screens. Okay, one was like dark so that it darkened the light. One of them was, you know, a focus screen. But inside there was a screen. When I took this thing apart, because I like taking things apart, but I took it apart for some parts that were inside that I wanted to use in an art project. When I took it apart, I found these 3 screens, okay? And I don't know why, but I saved them and stuck them away somewhere. So a couple years ago, I took 2 of those screens and I put them together because they were pretty strong, like plexiglass, because I was boxing in a back porch on my house, and I wanted to box it in solid to use it for storage, but I wanted a window in it, and I didn't want to go and buy a window, so this was plexiglass, so I decided to use this glass as a window. So I made my square, I put the plexiglass in there, and one of those plexiglasses, which I didn't notice at the time, had a pinpoint in the center, okay, and rings all the way out, pressed into the glass, okay? So when you look at it, everything's upside down. When you look outside, all the grass is up here and all the trees are down here, and it's really weird. Long story about that, but here's the point. In the winter, the sun is on the south of my house, which is where this piece of plexiglass with this round circular pinpoint of however they use them for whatever reason on these big screen TVs. And one day I'm walking by and I smell a burning smell. And what in the heck is that? And lo and behold, I saw a little smoke coming up from a piece of furniture that had faux leather on it that was burning from the light coming in this plexiglass window that has this pinpoint in the center and this, whatever you call it, concentric circles out in the glass, is burning a hole like a magnifying glass in this leather from the sun on this one day in this one exact spot. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is because we don't know what the atmosphere is doing to the sunlight when it's pinpointing to any specific places directly overhead across this flat map, okay? So maybe that's why on the equator, the sun pinpoints differently at overhead on just like what, high noon when it's passing over the equator in the middle of summer for us, okay? That's all I'm trying to say, is there's either something atmospheric that's distorting the light, or maybe the dome is distorting the light, okay? But
I can accept that. Yeah, there could be some electromagnetism that actually pushes the light to one side. But if you look at the sundial evidence, the sun's moving in a straight line. And if you look at time and date, because I put it on your page the other day, I took 24 pictures of time and date over a 24-hour period, and the sun is moving directly in a straight line from east to west. So that is evidence that backs up the sundials. Those two tie up together. But the AE map,
I don't argue with you that the AE map is wrong. I never liked the AE map to begin with, and obviously Jonathan doesn't like it either.
The AE map is tied in with the dome. They need a round-shaped thing to put a dome over the top.
Yes, you do, exactly, and that's one of the reasons why it's convoluted.
Yeah, so if the world was square, they're not going to push that because they can't put a dome on a square, can they? They'd have to put a big house over it or something.
Well, they can put a vault. Now, there's another word that's being bandied around in the Rob Skiba posted that on that thread that I was talking about with the show me proof of the dome thread this morning, today. He came on, and he's been a member of the group for months and months and months, and rarely, if ever, makes a comment. But today, he saw that post, and he made a comment. And he obviously came in from a biblical, religious, biblical standpoint, because that's where he bases his I don't even want to use the word bias. That's the basis of his input is from biblical scripture and other scriptures. He did include other scriptures, or I mean other books. So he used the word vault. Well, I looked up the word vault, and a vault is a ceiling. It doesn't say anything about walls. It just is a vaulted ceiling. You've been in a church that has a vaulted ceiling that has apses going off in different directions, okay? So a ceiling is not directly related to the walls that support a room, but we're not talking about a room. We're talking about the flat earth. We're talking about a very large expanse. And so, yes, in order to put this round cake plate dome, terrarium dome, on something, you would suspect people have it in their head, some people have it in their head that there's an ice wall around the perimeter and that there's a giant dome plopped right down over the top of it, however many miles or feet or hundreds of miles or thousands of miles back from the edge, but that all of this stuff is round, okay?
Yeah, but I say the whole basis of this AE map is based on a projection, which isn't a map. They're not maps.
Okay, so
they're just.
What do you propose we do? What do you propose we do about trying to make models?
I think people should start finding
how it works.
People should start finding data that supports each other in reality. So the sundials supports the evidence on time and date. On time and date, the sun is moving directly from east to west. The sundials show that the sun is moving in a straight line. It's not going round in a bend. So people should start looking at models where the sun is moving on a flat Earth, but not a circle. It's not a circular Earth. There isn't an ice fall around the edge. That's just been contrived.
All right. Now, if something is not a circle or a loop, how do you propose a beginning and an end? Where does it come from, and where does it go?
If you look on time and date, because I posted it on your page, you probably haven't a chance to look at it, and I put 24 photographs on there, and at one specific point, you've got half the sun on the east and half the sun on the west, and at other points, you've got the sun on one side of the earth and the sun on the other, and darkness in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you twisted that map round into like a cylinder, then where it joined up, the sun would be making a single.
But you just introduced curvature, and we can't have curvature because we can't have a cylinder because we can't have curvature because you can't find it.
Now we're talking about the properties of the cylinder, but on a flat surface, which is beyond what human comprehension is. But God made this Earth, not us. God's a lot brighter than us, and He's got access to a lot more advanced things than us. Just because we can't comprehend how that would work doesn't mean that that's what reality is. So we may not be on an infinite plane, and we may not be under a dome. We may well be on some other kind of enclosed system, which is a complete loop. So you could sail from east to west, keep going, and end up back where you started. That's what sailors say they do. They can sail around the world and get back where they started. Well, there's only two things you can do that on. There's a globe, and we know it's not a globe, or we can use it on a flat surface that's got some properties that we don't understand how they do it.
Well, you know, what I would say, too, is that if you consider the basically the vortex torus as the field emanating from the north and going all directions south, if you actually, you know, sort of try to picture that half toroid shape in your mind, it makes a lot of sense why, you know, if light was going to behave that way, to curve all the way around it and sort of attenuate closer to the center, it actually makes a lot of sense in that sort of a model. But even in that sort of model with the flat Earth and the sun going around in a circuit, it still, to me, doesn't mean that the maps we have are right, because for all we know, and from what I believe, I think that if you had a map that was an accurate depiction of where we live, it would be foreign to all of us. So.
Okay, so but let's go back to navigation. Let's go back to navigation. Okay, you're telling us, and I agree, that the maps that they use to sail ships from continent to continent across oceans are, what map are they using?
Well, they're using GPS, but you know, but if they were using a map, they certainly wouldn't be using the AE map, because they get hopelessly lost. And the Mercator map has been used for hundreds of years by sailors. It's acknowledged that they've used it, and they've got from A to B. And we should be using something similar to the Mercator map as the flat Earth map. It's the best we've got. Until we're not going to pay millions of pounds to get a cartographer to go out and make them.
All right. So are you saying that there are, just like this dome vernacular being inserted into the flat Earth movement, are you saying that the AE map was inserted into the flat Earth movement, possibly?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Okay, and that even the tricks that they use to fool us on other things, like using the flat Earth, so-called flat Earth map with the olive leaf branches at the bottom, supposedly representing the Antarctica ice ring, that was superimposed into the consciousness by using that for the UN, just to add. It's like, oh, look here, and then look here, and oh, here's a connection. Okay, humans look for patterns. That's what they do. That's one of the things we used to learn, you know, about stuff, is looking for connections and patterns in nature. Yeah. And okay, so you're saying
they've planted them there for us to find them and say, no, look. You know, the Civil Aviation Authority is using this. The Maritime Association is using an AE map. The weather people are using the AE map, and then the United Nations. Oh, it must be true, but it's not. They've just done it, and people have bought it. I bought it. I've done a presentation using the AE map as right, but I hadn't checked it out. But I've gone and done some research into the AE map, and they're not maps. They're not used for any kind of navigation. They're simple tools for measuring distances.
There's only a few times so far that I've seen you this agitated, Lawrence, and you know,
because
it definitely
on Facebook, don't they?
It's contagious, because I'm getting agitated too.
You're going to move it in January, aren't you, Laurie? You're going to change the heading on the page.
We already have a contest going to get rid of the Flat Earth Conspiracy logo. Yes, we have an art contest going for somebody to draw up a new logo that has nothing to do with the AE map. We certainly do.
Tell me somebody who uses. People say they do, but you show me a map, an AE map that's used by anybody to get from A to B.
Well, listen. Let me say this now. You know, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but I am a conspiracy theorist, and I am a critical thinker. I question everything, no matter, even if I've already questioned it before. That's just how I am, because I don't believe anything.
Well, Laura,
the very first thing that I saw when I came into the Flat Earth community, okay, doing the research, looking at the information, was the AE map somebody already designed the whole thing with the colors and the ice around the outside, and even that cute little jagged part of Antarctica, whatever that is. Forget the part that sticks out. And I, I, like everybody else, assumed when somebody like an Eric Dubay said, oh, and they even, with that soft voice that just tells you I'm confident, says, even the UN uses the flat Earth map. And you look and you go, look at that, that's exactly right. And so until I got further along in the research, I assumed that was correct, or correct enough to use as a model. And then everybody else did too, because they started coming up with suns and moons and animations and spinning and circling and all this stuff right over that nice handy little AE map drawn out with the blue for the water and the color for the land and the white for the ice. Yes, sir.
Laurie, let me ask you a question. Stinky Cash, tell me what you think about him in a sentence.
I can't even tell you what I think about him because I have no association with that idiot whatsoever.
All right, well, let me tell you something.
He caused me more grief when I first got involved in the Flat Earth movement than just about anybody associated with it, including Dubay, putting me on this chill wall of shame.
Well, he goes on Facebook pages and causes trouble and gets thrown off every page. Now, last week or the week before, 2 weeks running, straight after our show, or actually while our show was going, Stinky Cash was busy making videos with an AE map with a sun that was circling around it. 2 weeks running, yeah. And then Mark Sargent on his show, immediately following from our show, he's making special emphasis about this azimuthal equidistant map, which ain't a fucking map. It's just a tool.
You just R-rated our show.
In order for the map to work in reality, it has to show how it's light. It's light at this time in Australia while it's dark over in China, and vice versa. And as long as it does that, then to me we can still use it. But in terms of it being accurate as far as shapes and relative sizes, I think it's totally wrong. But we have to use something, though. We have to.
We don't have to use. We don't have to use reverse engineering. Oh boy, here you go. See, this is what you do, Lawrence. You scream over everybody.
Well, no. All I'm saying is we can refrain from using all maps, but at the same time, it does demonstrate how day and night work on a plane as opposed to a globe, and so it's useful in that respect. But I agree. We shouldn't be pushing out falsities. So if you're going to use an AE map, then just put the caveat, and I always do and always have. Use the caveat that you don't think is an accurate representation of the world as it is, which it isn't.
Well, listen. Anybody who goes to the mall is going to first time they've ever been to this mall, and they're looking for a specific store or store in a wing. They're going to go find one of those maps that says you are here.
Right.
Okay? That's a representation of where you are, as associated with the footprint of the whole mall, right? Well, that's the way people are used to thinking about the map, because they're grown up with a spinning globe in the classroom. And they, let's all hunker around the globe and let's all find certain countries and let's learn from, what is that thing, the atlas. Okay, let's get our atlas out and let's see where this country is and what they grow and all those things. We're taught all that stuff. Despite all the things that we're taught about what's going on out there, okay, that's all wrong. But we're all taught to think about, where am I right now associated with my environment, okay? So I don't get lost in the woods, or so I don't get lost driving in the car, or whatever. Maps are important to people.
Yeah, well, if you're watching the show.
A map to use that they wanted us to use, and they're ha-ha-ha-ing all the way to the UN, okay?
If you're watching the show, get on Google and type in azimuthal equidistant, and it'll bring up azimuthal equidistant projection. It brings that automatically. Go and click on some of the links and start reading through it, and you'll realize that it is not a map of the world. It's a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool for measuring distances through a central point to get accurate distances, and that's basically all it is. That Gleason map has been misrepresented as a map of the world because they broke the fingers off it. It's a timekeeping device. Go and check on the patent and you will see it's registered as a timekeeping device. It's not a map of the world, and the original is a crude drawing of a projection. It doesn't have all this extra detail and the all-seeing eyes and the pyramid on the top and all these little paragraphs in circles telling you how the sun is circling the earth. You know, I think that map's been...
the solstice little...
Stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff
Okay. You know what? At this point...
the original thing that was submitted to the patent office. It was just basically a map with two fingers on.
At this point, Lawrence, and we can talk about this week after week after week, and we can continue to expand upon it. But for now, you either need to make a suggestion on what you think we should do, and how to approach it. And I'm not going to say or forever.
I suggest that we use.
Find a solution to this problem that you've come up with, because it is a conundrum, and I don't like conundrums very well, and I don't like to pass on erroneous information to the next person. So I have stopped posting anything that has to do with the AE map on any of the postings that I make, and I have stopped posting anything with any models about how the sun and moon and stars work that are based on the AE Brown circle map with the dome over the top of it, because everybody's doing that. It's like this celestial sphere, you know, at work. But we have to start in the direction of finding a solution to this problem. Not that we need to all become map makers.
Well, that's why I think awareness is so important, and that's why I just push the proofs that the Earth isn't a globe, and also some of the proofs that align with the world being a stationary plane. But I'm not married to any map or model. But as long as we can keep raising awareness on this, eventually you're going to get a cartographer who just does this on their own volition. And so if we can sort of try to motivate them to do that, and, you know, curiosity or mystery is indeed the motivation for all science in the first place, and, you know, that's why I think it's important. I totally agree that those maps are probably wrong. I think the globe is dead wrong, however, so we're definitely not going to go back to that. Of course, I'll still use a globe to explain how the globe doesn't work, and so we have to have examples to point to because people are visual. And I guess it's important then to use the caveat of, hey, all you cartographers out there, we don't have any accurate maps, believe it or not. And eventually,
and if you want to be a rock star in the flat Earth community, which is the hottest and most trending, most up and coming information data dump in the history of mankind, then help us out and be a rock star and help us determine how to start to map this thing, how to make a new tool, because, you know, Lawrence said, you know, a map is a tool. Well, the first thing that came to my mind was hammer, and I've used a hammer for everything from a lever to banging in a nail to opening things up, wrecking drywall, to, I mean, every kind of thing you can think of I've used a hammer for. And so the same thing to go with, except to kill someone. I haven't done that yet.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Tell me why you think the Mercator map is incorrect. It's good enough for sailors, so you tell me why it's incorrect. Why you think it's incorrect.
Because a sailor can visually sail over here to the end of the Mercator map, okay, and he can logically look over here and say, this is where I'm going to come in at if I leave over here, and so then I'm just going to start going because I only have a big enough piece of paper for this map.
Okay, so you're a sailor. Okay, so you've been using...
But we're not playing real live Pac-Man here. Yeah, Pac-Man comes in and there he comes in.
Let's say it's the 1800s and you're sailing a long distance across the world, and you've been using the Mercator map for many years, and you've successfully got from your point of destination to your point of arrival, and you've been using the Mercator map. Yeah, so it must be accurate in some respects to get from A to B. We've got to agree on that because people have used it. It's provable.
Well, of course, but
yeah?
sooner or later, you're either going to run into the place you're going to, or you're going to have somebody up in the crow's nest going, land ho,
Right.
and then hey, there it is, right on time for the map.
How do you think the sailors would have got on if they'd been given the AE map? If they were sailing to Australia?
Well, listen, there were sailors who sailed across the ocean and around the world before there was ever a map.
Well, let's say they were using the maps. Let's say they didn't know how to use the stars. Let's say they were using the maps. They've been doing it successfully with the Mercator map. You give them the AE map, which is completely different. Don't you think they're going to get lost?
Well, I think Magellan probably would have gotten lost.
Yeah, they got frigging lost.
Okay, but Magellan made it. That's my point. And there was no map.
It did,
okay?
yeah. But not everybody.
Reality is still reality. We don't make reality as it's coming. This is not.
The reason I think the Mercator projection is not an accurate depiction of the ground is because it's a cylindrical conformal map. Period. That's what, by definition, it must be skewed, and so we just have to take it as a tool. That's really what it is too, is a tool. But it's not. It never was intended to be an accurate representation of the face of the Earth.
Why is it skewed, John? Tell me why.
Because it's a conformal map. It's a cylindrical conformal map. That's why it's skewed.
It's a flat map, flat square map.
Right.
Okay. Right now, I'm looking at the Mercator projection, the first one that came up on Wikipedia. I'm looking at it right now. Okay. Everybody that's listening should go and look at it right now. Go. Type in MERCATOR Mercator projection and click on it and look at the map, okay? There's white all the way across the bottom, and that's Antarctica, okay? And there's all of the continents spread out, and where dead ends on one side, it picks up back up on the other.
And there's no North Pole, just saying.
It's what?
There's no North Pole on the original Mercator projection.
Yeah, there's no North Pole. And Greenland is this gigantous continent that probably meant to include Antarctica as part of it or something. But it shows the tropic, or it shows the equator going through the middle, and all these little grids that are equally divided but skinnier. This is what's interesting. Skinnier in the middle, the squares, what you would probably think of as ley lines, but they're not. They're latitude and longitude. They're skinnier and smaller squares in the middle, and as they go out to the edges, they get elongated rectangles. Okay, they're still the same width, but they get longer. And
we told
but if you're sailing, okay, from New Zealand to South America, you're right on the edge of the Mercator map right there, and then bloop, you fall off the edge and you come over on the other side and you sail across the South Pacific, and you run into South America. Okay, there's no connect the dots place. Russia falls off one end and connects back up into Alaska on the other side. Okay, the world doesn't work that way. You don't fall off the edge and pop up on the other side. You just don't.
How do you know that Greenland is 1/14 the size of Africa? How do you know? That's what they're telling us. They're saying the size of Greenland.
I don't know, and I can honestly say I don't know. I've never been to Africa, and I've never been to Greenland.
So they could be lying.
For example, I watched a video a guy made, and here's another kind of a thing where, how do you know? Who do you trust? Here's a guy who got in his car and drove across Australia. And there was a question as to how wide Australia is. Is it 3,000 miles? Is it 5,000 miles? How wide is it? Okay, at its wide place. And this person, videoed their trek across Australia and said that it's 5,000 miles across, give or take a few hundred miles. And other people say, no way, it's only 3,000 miles across, because same as the United States, they're about. Who do you trust? Who do you believe? How do you know? if you can't trust the government, you can't trust the government's quasi-governmental organizations, it's NGOs, and you can't trust scientists because they're all bought, apparently, and you can't trust...
Well, the scientists are all sold on the globe model anyways.
Okay, so that's why
I'm just
the thing that we have to focus on, the only thing we can absolutely focus on is doing the proofs that say we don't live on a spinning ball and that the Earth is still and fixed and flat, okay? Beyond that, I don't have a problem with saying I don't know how it's mapped. I don't know what the edges look like. I don't know if there is an edge. I don't know if there's a square. I mean, there is such a thing as a square dome. Vaults are square domes that have groins in the corners that turn into a square, okay? I don't know. We could be living in a box for all I know. Why not? If the Earth, it says people always focus on the biblical stuff. People always focusing on the biblical stuff, and I've read it too, and I've questioned it too. Some of the descriptions, if you open your mind and don't get stuck on domes and curves, you could easily be living in a square. Four corners of the earth and holding back the winds and angels posted here and so on and so forth. Even though it also says God is above the circle of the earth. Circle does not mean sphere. Ball. Circle means a circle. Okay? That's where this AE map seemed to have gotten its legs, is the circle. The earth is the footstool, God's footstool. Well, okay, that kind of, footstool, putting the feet on the footstool. Yep, that all makes some sense. But again, we could be living in a Borg cube for all we know. And I say that facetiously, but there's a little part of my mind that says, you know what, you actually could. So I don't know. Lawrence dropped out again. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get my blood pressure back down a little bit. Lawrence gets me agitated when he gets that tone in his voice where he's just...
Well, I see what he's saying though, because we really...
I totally do.
We tend to sort of rush towards ideas that help us to understand things, and we rush towards ideas that help us to explain things. And so I still think that there's a good purpose for those maps in that regard. But again, what is time? Time is just from the time it takes the sun to go from overhead all the way back to night and then back overhead again. That's a day. That's 24 hours, because those are the labels we put on that amount of time. And so, as human beings, we want to be able to understand, the world. And so, the globe model works in theory, to a degree, and so does the flat Earth model, or the flat Earth maps that we're pointing to. They work in theory to a degree, but it is important that we don't just take things and run with it. So I definitely see where he's coming from, but to me, the proofs are so basic and simple that we're only left with one adequate conclusion, that the Earth is certainly not a spinning globe. And so, if we can just get more people looking at this, and more people that have technical experience, like cartographers and even animators and 3D modelers, I think eventually, with enough people helping out and enough people waking up to this truth, we're going to have a very sharp and very concise model. But it takes this sort of conversation, and it takes that sort of dissent to arrive at the best possible models. And so that's a very important step in the process.
It also takes pressure to not be lazy. Humans are inherently lazy, I believe. I know myself, if I'm not prompted to get out of bed, I could laze around there for an extra hour every day. I can leave the dishes in the sink overnight and not put them in the dishwasher or wash them. And so what seems to be happening is that, based on this sort of lazy, lackadaisical attitude, we were spoon-fed all of the information that we had our entire lives when we went to school. From the time we walked in the door to the time we got that little square thing put on the top of our head. What do we call that? The that square thing.
Square head.
Yeah, square head. The square over the dome. Yeah. The you know, we're spoon-fed everything that we're taught, expected to believe, and are tested and graded on. Not so much that we understand the information, but that we believe it, so that it's stuck in our heads. And so, when you start to rip all that stuff out, it's natural to want to replace it with something. But at the same time, it's also natural to let other people do it, and let other people who you know, enjoy that kind of thing do the models and make the videos and so on and so forth. Anybody can learn how to make a YouTube video. It isn't hard, and anybody can get all the software they want for free to make videos, to write blogs, to, you know, to have a website, all that stuff. And so there's nothing any real technical about a whole lot of these things. If I can do it, anyone can do it. If I can do Hangouts, anyone can do Hangouts, because they're not hard, okay? But what I see happening, and this is one of the things that I'm going to continue to be a voice of agitation about, is I see people falling into patterns of lazily accepting what other people say because it sounds good, because they have confidence, because they you know, seem to have done their research and their homework, and they say it with, you know, authority. And that's what we've been used to our whole lives. That's part of the follower culture, is somebody authoritative, you know, comes on TV or comes in front of your meeting in your classroom or whatever, and says, now this is how it works. And that's what I'm finding about this whole concept with the dome. The dome, the dome, the dome. We live under a dome, whether it's Mark Sargent saying Truman Show dome, or whether it's Eric Dubay saying, you know, blah, 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 this stuff circles around the dome. I mean, I've heard him, all these people are saying this word now, and if that's what everybody wants to accept, that's fine. But it's not fine with me, and I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to continue to be an adjutant about it. So.
Oh yeah, I've made videos just basically explaining there probably isn't a dome, or at least I don't believe there's any sort of dome. But you know, and then also in terms of the firmament and what was being described with the firmament, and people just get really mad if you suggest there probably isn't a dome in the sky, because for what reason I don't know, but people get really attached to their version of things, and they get defensive about it, and that's not how science should work.
Oh, not only that, I've had people say, "What's the matter with you? Aren't you satisfied with living under, you know, in our dome, our nice little enclosed world? It's safe here. God's watching out for us." And I'm like,
quick question, Laurie. And
okay.
you, John. This is a question. You just got to give me a straight answer. Okay. So look, I've given you both a big yacht. Okay, and you're going to go down to Florida, to wherever the yacht is moored, and you've got no GPS, and you've got a compass, and you're going to sail from Florida to Sydney Harbour, and you've got a choice. You've either got the AE map or you've got the Mercator map. You can only pick one. Which are you going to have? Laurie, you first. Which map are you going to pick?
If I have a compass, I'm going to rely more on the compass than I'm going to rely on the map.
Well, you've got a choice of two maps. Which one are you going to take?
I only get one of the maps?
Yep, you've got one.
Well, I'm going to have done my homework before I set sail. I'm not a Gilligan, and I'm going to find out that historically sailors have used Mercator maps to find their way, so I'm probably going to choose the Mercator map over the AE map.
Well, John, which map are you going to take, mate?
Well, I've never tried either of them in an navigational sense, so I mean, I guess I'd go with the one that people have been using, which is the Mercator projection. But I mean, that still doesn't mean that it's an accurate depiction of what the world looks like. Again, it's a cylindrical.
Right. John, the very fact that you've said that tells me that you think that is a better depiction of where we live than the AE map. So there's no good reason to actually use the AE map in any modelling, because you would use that map to get from A to B.
Okay, now you said that, and you boxed. Let's say you boxed this into using the
You in
Mercator.
deliberately, yeah.
No. We both said Mercator, okay, and then you said now you can't use the AE map anymore, okay? Now, what anyone is going to do when someone says, "So I'm new to this flat Earth thing. How does it work?" Well, I'm going to have to start to explain how the flat Earth works, which I don't really have any full grasp of yet, except for the fact that it's fixed and it's flat and there's no curvature and we're not spinning, okay? But in order for me to explain it to them, see, it's been automatic. It's been very easy to just take that AE map and say, the UN's using it. I bet that this is some kind of conspiracy to disguise the way our world works. I'm not going to do that anymore, okay? But I'm not confident yet to pull out the Mercator map, because what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, wait a minute. How does this water not flow off the sides? You know, I don't have an answer to that.
Well, and if Mark Sargent gets the message back, Mark Sargent, get somebody on your show to come on and tell us that they navigate with this map that you're pushing, this AE map. Nobody navigates with it. You bring somebody on, you can't, but you're pushing it as though it's the truth. And it's a big lie.
Okay, so now the only effort that I'm going to make to try to convince someone that the Earth is flat instead of it being a spinning ball is I'm not going to give them a visual. Okay, I don't even say. I hear people say it all the time. I can't bring myself to say it because I've never seen it and I don't know that it exists. We're surrounded by an ice wall. Okay, I hear it all the time. I don't know that there's an ice wall. I mean, I know there's an ice wall because I've seen it, but I don't know that it goes all the way around, and I don't know that that's what holds the oceans in and keeps them from flowing over the sides. The Mercator map what does it have, an ice wall around the, big square ice wall? Then we do live in a square. We do live in a box, okay?
The Mercator map's got, it's got an ice wall at the top.
But you can't circumnavigate all the way around. You can't go around here and around there and back around here and come ploop out the other side.
Not in conventional sense, no. I mean, God made the earth in 6 days, apparently, didn't he? The Bible says he made it in 6 days. So, did he have a load of men, huge men, giants who built it, or did he actually create this place in his mind and make it something that's, just basically our imagination?
Well, I believe that the Bible indicates that God spoke everything into existence, and to me that certainly resonates, pun intended, because all matter has a sort of vibrational harmonic resonance, and I think that sort of harmonic resonance, if you look at cymatics or sonic luminescence, there's something to this, and I think that the Bible and especially the Old Testament was probably hinting at a very fundamental truth that harmonic resonance has a lot more to do with the reality that we're familiar with than it's given credit for. So, but yeah, not to interrupt you, but I think that's probably something that the Bible is also correct on, is that God, there wasn't giants that built all this, the Creator just spoke it into existence. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, there's a question for you both. I know I'm asking the questions now, but do either of you think that the powers that be, the people that are running this earth, do you think any of them have ever been outside whatever is contained in earth? Have they left?
Say the end of that again. That they've ever left.
Do you
what?
think that the powers that be, the elites, the people that run the earth,
the liars that be, okay,
have they ever left this place we live in?
I think it's possible.
And do you think they're
wait. Describe this place we live in. You mean our physical realm that we know, that
the boundaries that we know
the boundaries of right now?
Yeah. Do you think they've been beyond the boundaries? They
yes.
must have been beyond. They must have been beyond it, because they're making. Why is there such a big cover up? 500 years. They must know something.
Well, I think it's it's highly possible that okay, let me start over. And I don't mean to specifically use a biblical idea to describe this, but for example, when Jesus died and ascended to heaven, okay, it says no one has ever ascended but him, and then he came back. So that means he went through our dimension to another dimension and came back to our dimension again. Okay, Enoch writes of, and again, Enoch could be writing a beautiful fiction story. Don't know, can't be sure. But Enoch left this realm and went above and beyond it to be able to look down upon it. People say they've gone to hell. There is no physical place that I can enter in, no door, no building, no hole in the ground that I can go into that represents hell in this physical realm. So that means it has to be another dimensional plane, another layer, another, in your meat suit, you cannot go there. Only your spirit, only your soul, whatever. So if that's happened with people, you know, with humans, I mean, Jesus was a human and then ascended and then came back, and he didn't look like he did. People didn't recognize him, so he didn't look the same. He didn't somehow appear the same. I do believe that there are other dimensions and that we cannot go to. I even believe sometimes that there's parallel dimensions of actual things going on at the same exact time that sometimes maybe bump into ours and warp into it or something. I don't know. But there was a show on Netflix I watched the whole several seasons called Fringe that was quite interesting about multiple dimensions. But as far as can someone travel somewhere in this physical plane to another place that we don't know about, that's highly possible. There could be something over beyond the ice. There could be some, I don't believe in hollow earth. I never have. I can't wrap my mind around it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I can't wrap my mind around it. But yeah, I think, and even beyond that, I think there's actually a hidey hole, a hidey place where these people can go to get away from us.
All right. Well, we're told that Antarctica is guarded by the military. If it was as we're told, and it's the perimeter, they need thousands of ships to actually patrol that. But equally, the North Pole is off limits for us as well. The only people that are allowed to go to the North Pole are government departments. Now, if the North Pole was, as we are told, is right in the centre, what reason would they have for prohibiting us from going there? Because there would be nothing to see apart from ice, and there'd be no exit points anywhere else. It'd be right in the middle, wouldn't it? So why do you think
it doesn't even exist? Maybe it doesn't even exist.
Why do you think?
And maybe the poles are flipped. Maybe the little pointer on the compass is telling us where it's pointing to north, but maybe it's actually pointing to south.
Well,
and that could be a big punk we've been going through for a long time too, right?
Well, all right. Well, why do you think the North Pole is off limits as well?
I would say again, I'm sort of thinking along the mindset of toroidal mathematics, for lack of a better word, or vortex mathematics, and thinking of the atmosphere being compelled to or compelled by a toroid, an electromagnetic field. And the eye of a hurricane is sort of like where the North Pole would be if you're looking over top of the thing. So the North Pole would be like the eye of this vortex, the eye of this donut-shaped, toroid shape, and I think they're keeping us away from there because, possibly because reality as we know it, or reality may start to behave differently than we're accustomed to beyond this bubble, beyond this matrix, beyond this electromagnetic field that causes light to become visible. You can't see light in space because it's not broken down into the correct spectrum. You have to have this matrix, this electromagnetic field, in order for light, in order for possibly even physical matter. I mean, who knows? It's possible. And so I just think they would keep us away from the center and away from the edges, because it's probably either dangerous, maybe to us, or possibly it's dangerous to their whole deception. I don't know, but I think that's probably why. I think, if you get too close to the eye of this vortex, it just might be dangerous to some extent, if only to their, dangerous to their deception. So.
Okay, here's a question that just came in the Flat Earth Conspiracy Facebook page. It says, I am relatively new to the Flat Earth community. I've learned a lot in the last few weeks. However, I haven't heard what the model proposes about meteor showers. Would anyone care to enlighten me with some resources? You want to jump on that?
Sure.
See, that's what I'm talking about. I deal with this all day, every day.
Yeah, meteor showers are pretty interesting, and the conventional explanation is just like space debris that's going at high velocities and crosses paths with the Earth, and as they enter, our atmosphere, the friction causes them to light up and it makes them visible. And I think probably something very similar is the case with meteors on the flat Earth model. The atmosphere certainly still exists, and space, however, that's a horse of a different color in the model that I subscribe to. The stars are not millions of light years away. The sun isn't nearly as far away as we've been told. However, the atmosphere still exists, and the principle of something traveling at high velocities in the absence of matter of space, I wouldn't call it a vacuum necessarily. But something traveling at high velocities, for all we know, it could be a bit of a star fell off, if stars are actually physical matter, which we're not sure if they are. But yeah, I still think there could be physical items up there, only they're not orbiting a globe. They're orbiting the common center, which is fixed at the North Pole, that magnetic center.
Okay, so how does that square with a dome?
I don't think it's conducive to a dome at all. I think if there was a dome, they would hit the wall of it and bounce out. They'd never fall to the ground. But then again, you've got people who say, well, they're chunks of the dome falling off, and I think that's equally ridiculous.
Okay.
So magnetic north, what can somebody tell me what magnetic north actually means? Because the question's been bandied around. I mean, what makes a compass point to the north?
It's those electromagnetic aberrations, or the electromagnetic flux of the Earth itself. It's just electromagnetism. That's all it is, and it's the North Pole is simply the positive. I've got that right. Either the positive or the negative polarity of this huge electromagnet that is the face of the Earth.
Here's another one. My husband read today that the curvature of the Earth isn't visible unless you're more than 6 miles up. He doesn't believe in the flat Earth yet. We modeled it, and that seems very reasonable. So it seems like many photos of a flat horizon wouldn't be useful as proof one way or the other. Does that make sense? Is there something about that I'm missing? So I'm back to trying to convince him using the math that shows visibility, but we live in a mountainous area, so it's hard to do that around here.
Yeah, she's definitely got a point, and I think one good way to describe this is, Columbus always said the way that the masts of ships appear over the horizon before the hull was proof of a globe, and I think that the point to a lot of the experiments was to refute that, because it isn't. It's just a demonstration of the laws of perspective. But a lot of people get confused. If you're looking at a distant skyline that's, say, 50 miles away, you may only be able to see nearby you a couple miles across, but when you get to 50 and 60 miles away, even an inch represents many, many, many miles. And so when you're looking at those distances, say 50 miles away, first of all, those buildings on the horizon should be based a quarter mile beneath the horizon line, which we can clearly see that's not what's happening. We can see the buildings from 50, 60 miles away. But furthermore, those buildings should be founded on a curve, which they're not. So, looking at distant horizons is a good way to show that the Earth isn't a globe. But as far as being able to see the curve of the Earth from above 6 miles away, there's definitely something to that. However, I would say that if you're looking at weather balloon footage from 20 and 30 and 40 miles up, that's certainly greater than 6 miles, and we still don't see any curvature of the horizon. And so to me, also, the horizon raises with the observer all the way up to 20 and 30 and 40 miles. All of this is very conclusive evidence that the Earth isn't a globe, to me.
See, we deal with questions like that all day long in the Flat Earth community, especially on this page, because everyone in this group are already flat earthers of one degree or another. And one of the things that is difficult but helpful at the same time is the fact that many of the people that are in the group has like 2,400 plus members. Many of the people in the group have been there since it started 9 months ago and have continuously researched the entire time. And so, you know, they're on the Rapid Ready program. They have already done about as much, you know, research as a person can do, watching hundreds or probably even thousands. Some of these people have probably watched thousands of videos, or 1,000, and yet at the same time there's new people coming in every day. There's been, you know, several waves of people coming in. The new ones that are coming in based on now that it's trending, meaning they're seeing it in their news feed, they're seeing it, you know, from their friends talking about it, and so now they're coming in based in curiosity rather than having their flat Earth switch flipped on.
Yeah, that's a big problem, Laurie, because the die-hard flat earthers, those that have been looking at it for a long time, we actually had to go out and at least do some research to find out what it's all about. But the ones that come into it now have been spoon-fed by the big names who aren't, strictly speaking, telling the truth. So when they come onto your page, they've already got a preconceived idea of what it's all about, which may not necessarily be true. And that's the problem. Whereas, you know, when you got into it, you decided to start, you know, looking at independently to see what you could find out that backed up what was being said. But they're not doing it. They're just, well, some maybe, but a lot of them are just taking it all at face value that, you know, Flat Earth is a new group, and they would have no reason to lie to us. But as with all big conspiracies, the powers that be put their people at the forefront to lead the movement at the start in the direction they want them to go. I'm pretty sure they don't want this to get out to the mainstream, but if it does get out, then they want their version of it to be the one that they're going to present to us, and that's the big problem we've got. So we're spending, I spend my time now arguing about the model rather than the facts that support that it's flat, because it's so obviously flat. You know, you just got to get on an airplane and you know it's flat. You know, one thing like that. I mean, if Apollo could take, you know, if the moon missions were genuine and they got some good decent cameras, you'd be able to see aeroplanes flying upside down in Australia and upside the right side up over the top, but you wouldn't, because they can't do it.
Well, I mean, look what you just said. Here's the supposed ISS flying over the globe, okay, shooting photographs in real time. I mean, I watched one with you, Jonathan, where you were, what's that called, the Globebusters that you're on? Okay.
ISS Live, yeah.
Okay, and you're watching live footage of the so-called ISS, and why is it that there's enough visibility for them to be able to see street lights in cities on the ground, yet we see no other satellites, we see no debris, we see no shooting stars, we see no airplanes, no jumbo jets flying below.
You can watch the ISS live all day long and all night long, but you'll never ever see street lights from the live feed. But what you will see is that they'll add street lights into the images, into the animations later on when they archive it.
Oh, and lightning. I love the lightning. That's
there's
really
you never see any lightning, where if you really were that high up looking at that large of a chunk of the Earth, you'd see lightning all over the place. But yeah, you never see it live. They add that sort of thing in later. And NASA's guilty of a lot of trickery, but most people just log into the ISS, they watch it for a few minutes. It usually goes down every 10 minutes for about 15 minutes. very rarely will you ever sit there longer than 20 minutes without the feed just crashing and you have to wait. But yeah, there's all sorts of anomalies with that. I think they're probably mixing in high altitude flight with just straight up CGI. That's what I think they're doing. And in terms of being able to look through a telescope and seeing the ISS, come by as a dot in the sky right on time, people think that proves that it's there. But actually, if you look at the distances involved, you'd never be able to see the ISS from those sort of distances. It seems like they're using either high altitude, like U-2 type spy planes that are possibly retrofitted to look like the ISS would, or it could be something more exotic. But just because you can look up in a telescope and see what you think is the ISS coming by on time doesn't necessarily mean that it's up there. And I'll even go a step further and say, even if there really is an orbiting tin can up there, it doesn't mean we live on a globe, because I think it's still possible. The moon, the sun, and stars still go around in circles with the North Pole, concentric with the North Pole. So why couldn't some physical object that we send up there do the same thing? And, looking up in the stars isn't going to prove much about, where we're standing. We have to look here on the ground and use the scientific method to prove that. So I try to stay away from astronomy and looking through telescopes as much as possible, unless we're going to make observations and just look at the data, not say, oh, well, I can see spheres in the night sky, therefore we live on a sphere in the night sky. It's illogical.
Well, it's the same thing with GPS, for example. Okay, people have. When did they start the GPS concept?
Laura, if you're talking about mariners, they were using the Loran system for long before there was ever such a thing as GPS. And the Loran system is essentially bouncing radio frequency waves off the ionosphere to basically jump to farther distances than are possible on the ground. But in terms of GPS, I submit that the military has been using or constructing GPS since the 1940s and the 1950s. And certainly the military was using things like radio triangulation in order to achieve the same ends that GPS achieves. And furthermore, satellites couldn't do what they say that they do in terms of transmitting radio frequencies these vast distances, which is impossible, but they're also unnecessary. Again, we can achieve the internet, we can achieve GPS, we can achieve worldwide communications with ground-based systems. Radar, weather radar, the Doppler system, where you can look, turn on the Weather Channel and see animations of the clouds. That's not taken from space, but most people think that it is. But that's actually taken from ground-based, tower-based systems. And so I think that there's a great deal of deception going on, not necessarily in the last 500 years, but in the last 50 to 100 years. And I think that the deception started after Admiral Byrd went and did the high jump expedition and probably found something interesting because of the way that the world military powers acted after he went down there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The timing on that, and all of the science associated with it, all of the technology advancements associated with all the fabulous things that they say we're using today, all came about as a result of that timing right after World War II. And ground-based. The internet, for example, 90% of the internet, this is what they claim already, is that 90% of the internet is submarine cable ground-based. And then add that once you get back on land to towers, cell towers, all over the countries wherever they're using it. So it's not hard to have a 3 or 4 point triangulation. Triangulation 4, that doesn't work, does it? To create the appearance of GPS, and that's what we're using.
Well, and they had
the appearance of GPS.
They had to do that. They had to come up with a way to monetize it, because I harp on this point a lot, but Nikola Tesla came up with the technology to achieve these ends. He was the inventor of all this, radio frequency triangulation and just all sorts of stuff that is often attributed to Thomas Edison was actually invented by Tesla, but he died in, I believe it was 1943, basically penniless. And I submit, my theory sort of goes that J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, all those wonderful guys, they wanted to monetize Tesla-based technologies, and you really can't. I mean, once you understand that you're really just tapping into the natural energies that are coming up from the Earth and generated from the Earth, that's what Tesla wanted to do, and he wanted his technologies to better everyone for free because it is pretty simple, and you're just piggybacking on the natural energies of the Earth. But so they didn't want that. J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers didn't want that. They wanted to monetize it. They wanted you to pay your power bill every month. They wanted you to pay your AT&T phone bill and your cell phone bill every month. And people aren't going to do that unless they think, apparently, that you have to fire rocket ships into space and get satellites to orbit the Earth in order to get these technologies to work. But the plain, simple fact of the matter is you don't. You don't need satellites to achieve these ends. So it's a pretty clever trick that they did. You got to hand it to them.
Here's a question for you then, John. Now you're talking about nuclear power. I did look quite a bit into nuclear weapons being obviously just a fear tactic and a big hoax. Do you think that Nikola Tesla's technology that they confiscated, do you think that's been researched by government scientists and repackaged as nuclear power when it's actually a free source of energy? And we're paying for energy that they're getting for free, and we're paying to get rid of nuclear waste that doesn't exist.
I think that's very possible. Yep.
So that is a huge lie, isn't it? Well, why if that was the case, why don't they go totally nuclear and have total free energy and they'd make even more money? That's the only downside as to why they wouldn't be doing that. If they can get enough free energy to power the power stations they've got now, why don't they just do everything? They wouldn't need any coal or anything then, would they? They could just do Tesla technology for everything.
Yeah, I think you absolutely could, and if you sort of just dissect what is quote unquote nuclear power anyway, it's not anything that complex or bizarre. It's simply generating heat from a sort of exotic source. But essentially, nuclear power is steam power. If you think about it, it's the same concept of spinning things by harnessing heat. Heat energy is simply transferred into another form of energy by a little bit of craftiness, a little bit of cleverness. So nuclear power, I think, is a misnomer. But sure, I think it's possible that they're just pulling energy out of the void. A lot of people call it zero-point energy, which is sort of the cutting edge of science. And I think that we're going to see huge advances in free energy technologies over the next decade that are going to change a lot. But I also think it's sort of a shame because we could have had this stuff all along if Nikola Tesla would have been promoted during his prime as opposed to being ruined and have the powers that be propping up Thomas Edison. That was a huge disservice to humanity, and hopefully we'll see that be I want to say avenged. Avenge is probably a harsh word, but sure, I'll use it. I'd like to see that avenged.
Yeah, I kind of like that word.
In the UK, we get an awful lot of the so-called nuclear waste, which we charge other countries a lot of money to reprocess. The UK is probably the financial centre of the world. In reality, we're probably told it's the United States, but it's probably the UK. I think all the directions come from the UK, and the Rothschild family and what have you. They're all based over here and in France. So it may well be that we're just making pots of money to process what is probably tankers full of just ordinary water, because there's a video on YouTube about a guy who was swimming in.
That sucks so bad.
No, they are fleecing us, charging money to reprocess water.
Well, I mean, for crying out loud, they ship our recyclable plastic crap all the way over to China to melt
Yeah.
it down and make plastic BBs out of it and ship it back in the form of something else, you know? It's
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that CERN probably falls under that same banner as well, of a theoretical concept just being capitalized on, and I also think the point of those sort of things like CERN and NASA is to pigeonhole legitimate scientists into looking at something that's never going to yield the truth. It's just going to yield more and more questions and a deeper dive into something that's theoretically possible, but not possible at all when you actually realize this whole truth. So yeah, I think it's very possible that what we consider as nuclear power plants are not using that process at all. It's an antiquated process, and when you realize that there is, a way to just basically pull energy out of the natural earth, it becomes really sort of stupid to think that they're using nuclear technology, which is very well antiquated.
okay. So one of the other things that I run into all the time, as far as these newer people that are coming in, is sadly they ask a question that has been asked and answered multiple times within the group, and it's gotten to the point where there's sort of pat answers to so many things, and I'm not talking about classic things like curvature. Because I didn't quite understand the whole concept of curvature and the spherical trigonometry and the mathematical equations for being able to find it or not find it, as the case may be. And so I went out and did my own experiment with my own camera and followed the boat. That's my contribution. One of them so far was the red boat video. But when these new people come in and they say, so my husband's a pilot, or so how does blah blah, and everybody's like, you're a troll. You're asking a troll question. It's like, no, it's a real question. There's so many, and then they'll say, can you share me a link, or can you share me a video, or can you point me in the direction of a resource where I can learn about this thing, whatever it is they're asking about. And I've watched a boatload of videos myself from all different video makers and YouTubers and so on, and I find something wrong almost all the time with almost everything. There's some, I'll be going along and everything's good, and then all of a sudden, ding, 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 nope, wrong. Now I can't share your video. And so one of the hardest ones, I found this guy that I really like his videos because he doesn't presuppose too many things, and is P-Brain. P-Brain, B-R-A-N-E. I don't know if you've watched any of his stuff.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff on Perspective. It was really good.
Yeah, and so he doesn't go into too many areas that he doesn't have some kind of expertise in, but lo and behold, right in the middle of that video is an AE map that he's using to describe something about how the sun goes around. Okay, so the sun going around is stuck in the hive mind, community consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I think the sun does go around too. I don't think that equating the maps being inaccurate to the sun somehow not going around is sort of a leap to make, because there's lots of good evidence that shows that the sun does go in a circuit because it leaves out one way and comes back the other way. Now, there could be some other exotic explanation for this, but to me, the easiest explanation is that the sun goes in a circuit that's concentric with the North Pole. But I see what you're saying.
So as the questions progress with each person, they're going to happen upon different questions, things they question, as they're learning this information. So, you know, it's amazing because early on, you know, I came out and was like, oh, we don't need any leaders. You know, we absolutely need to make sure that we keep this a leaderless movement. And everybody's like, yeah, you're right, I agree. But then I came back and I said, you know, to qualify that, there's a big difference between having no leaders and having some kind of a organizational group where, you know, we can collect information and maybe make a speakers bureau, or maybe make a you know, write a what do they call it when you write a book online and you everybody can edit it? Not a wiki, but I'll think of it.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of like a wiki, though. Yeah.
Like yeah, okay, and that, you know, we can start to collect information that people can go to one source that we feel this information's been verified. Okay, this information is good, and keep adding to it. Start somewhere. We have some kind of a little seed to grow from, and then immediately it was like, no, you know, we can't have that because someone always tries to control things like that. But if it's open source, that's the word I was thinking.
Yeah.
If it's open source, no one really can control it. You know, even if you had sort of a committee that was constantly being replaced, or you know, I myself find problems with stuff like that because I start thinking, uh-oh, the rise of the technocrats in the flat earth community, you know. And so, but how are we ever going to arrive at a map model? How are we ever going to arrive at an explanation for how the sun, moon, and stars work? How, you know, things that are on the ground we can explain because we can be in it, you know. But once you get above a certain level, there's no expert because none of us have been there. I don't know that there was a question in there about that,
No,
but maybe just a topic to discuss.
Well, what I was going to say is, yeah, I know what you mean with people coming with questions that have been asked and answered, but I think that's largely because there is no really go-to group of people for information on this, and that's sort of its biggest strength and also its biggest weakness. Because you're right. I mean, when you get groups of people that are sort of gatekeepers or in control of information, then you open yourself up to all sorts of problems. Yeah, not saying any names or anything, but yeah, and so I definitely get what you're saying. But at the same time, we can't attack people for asking legitimate fundamental questions because a lot of times that's the only way people know how to learn. And if you ask 10 people whether the Earth is flat or whether it's a spinning globe, all 10 of them are going to tell you it's a spinning globe, even though that's totally wrong. So to me, it's really up to the individual to do the experimentation, to do the research. But at the same time, you know, I think we probably should and one day will have a central place to get information and for the community to sort of edit that and debate that around. But at this point, I think it's adequate enough to explain some basic proofs and motivate the individual to do the experimentation and at least the research on their own. Because look at the Constitution. I mean, you think that was a great way to keep this corruption from entering in the power structure of American politics or whatever, but ultimately it did.
And it was usurped, and we don't even have that anymore, right?
Yeah, ultimately, corruption is going to infest any brick and mortar business or organization that has control over information, because you know, knowledge is power, and unfortunately, psychopaths crave power, and that's why I think, you know, again, the best way to put it is that's sort of our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, because you know, it's real easy to find NASA and to find their numbers. But it's not that easy to find good numbers on the flat Earth model, and we can certainly point to the maps and prove that. So,
well, not only that, but there is no shortcut to or you know, circumnavigation around doing your own observation. Research is one thing. Research is looking into the observations of other people, but your own personal observations, like going out and taking some film or some pictures or some measurements, or traveling, going to the flattest places on the earth, that that's where you have to go out and spend money. But it doesn't take any money to go out and observe flat water, or um, taking a hike up into a mountain and looking out over a vista, and seeing what you see, and understanding how your eyes work, and what a horizon is, and how the line of convergence works, and just all kinds of stuff like that's free observations to make, to put it in, solidify it in your own heart, in your own mind, that the earth is flat. You don't need anybody to tell you it is, and you don't need any special formulas to see that. You only need to observe yourself, and then once you read something that someone else says, go observe it for yourself and back it up and see if it's true. That's why like Jonathan and I are going, well, I don't know about these time and date things with Lawrence is talking about, because I haven't sat down and watched them yet, or I haven't gone on these websites and looked at this or that. And yeah, you can send me all the pictures you want, but out of context, it doesn't make any sense. And so, yes, Lawrence is doing what he can to challenge people to investigate on their own, to observe on their own. But with so many things, you're at the mercy of government-produced data, which the minute I even hear those words, I just go, fake. I don't know why, but I guess just historically that's been true.
Well, using the Mark Sargent term, the authority, they knew at some point that we would discover that we'd been lied to about where we live. They knew we would find out the earth was flat. So these people do plan generations in advance, to make sure that things go in the direction that they want them to go. So the question is, when did they start planning? Because Rowbotham, I've looked into Rowbotham, who was a Freemason. I think he was a member of, some Freemason lodge, and he was also a wholly unsavory character. He, did things. How do we know that his job wasn't to, put some information about the flat earth which was mostly correct, but in a few strategic areas he was putting out false information? How far back do you think they were planning the events that are unfolding today? Because obviously they knew it was coming. How far back would you say it started? We know about the flat earth cards, the Illuminati cards. There was a flat earth card, and they were first devised about, what, mid-1980s? 30 years ago?
I think easily you could say that prior to the technological advancement that they've given the peons, us, they've had technical advancement prior to us getting it. It's kind of like, oh, we used Tang to go to the moon, and now you can drink Tang at home. Now you're a part of the advancement of humanity and the technological age. And so what I believe is the minute that they started planning technology to come be given out into common people, and selling it to them, that's part of the catch-22. They wanted to make money off of it, and they wanted to sell it to us as third generation. By the time we get it, they're like already way past that. They knew that sooner or later we would be able to use this technology to flip around and use it for something other than a hammer, and discover some things with telescopes. And I don't know, when was the first high-powered telescope put out there for a person to buy, a normal person? I mean, I'm sure the first one was like the first microwave oven. It's very expensive, or the first computer. But now anybody can buy some degree of a telescope. You can buy one for $50, $60 or less.
Oh. Had telescopes for 50 years or more, haven't you? I remember my friend got one next door in the 1960s. He You've got a great big
Yeah, I mean,
telescope.
I'm not talking about the little thing that the pirates and the
Oh,
sailors.
great big ones, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know,
Well,
on top
here's a
of that,
question for you, though.
the
Let me ask you a
the
question.
the movies and things, all the movies and things, you know, somebody just compiled a video the other day that I thought was marvelous of all of the most recent predictive programming excerpts out of movies that show dome after dome after dome. They show, you know, flat Earth maps on them. What's the Pirates of the Caribbean? Is that the one that Johnny Depp is in? You know, or made repeatedly. They show little round, sort of versions of AE maps, all rolled up and crunk dirty, and you know, on the aboard the pirate ship. So they've been implementing this permission granting. This is what I call it. If we show you what we're doing and we show you what the truth is, but you're too stupid to figure it out, does that mean that you've granted us permission to keep on punking you? Yeah, that's kind of what they think it means, I think, and so far it's been working.
Yeah, they give you clues and tell you what's happened, and that's their
hide in plain sight stuff.
You know,
right.
Clues are out there. If you don't find them, that's your fault. But because we've given you the clues, that gives us permission to go ahead and carry out whatever we've done. But Laurie, you're a similar age to me, and you probably remember the Apollo missions in the '60s, and sat at home on TV watching Apollo 8 and Apollo 9 and what have you. Do you actually think that those were real rockets, or do you think they were movies filmed in advance?
At the time, obviously, I thought they were rockets, and they were taking off, and they were going to space, and you know, they were landing on the moon, and actually the first moon landing, I was all in until I saw the splashdown capsule retrieval bullshit.
Do you think Apollo 11 was a real rocket, or was it just filmed in advance and shown to us as reality?
Well, there were people, you know, witnessing.
But how do you know that was a renter crowd? If
you look at I've personally been to Cape Canaveral and watched the rocket launches, and if you're in Florida anywhere, you could see them. And I grew up in Florida in the '90s, so I know they're definitely launching rockets.
Where are they going?
I don't think they're going to space.
Well, they could be going over to that new other pond over there in on the other side of Antarctica. Or they could just be going kerplunk in the drink somewhere out there.
Have you ever seen Capricorn 1?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
did you finally watch it, John? I sent you that link. Did you finally watch all of Capricorn 1?
Yeah, I watched it. And
Fabulous
I actually put it up on YouTube, and believe it or not, they took it down for copyright infringement or whatever. So I put it on my Google Drive page and just put a link on a video. So I've actually still got it up on Google Drive for anyone that wants to watch it. It's pretty hard to find.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find, and usually it's listed under some foreign language or something, and you think that it's going to have crappy subtitles and all that stuff, but
normally,
you know,
a video that old, if you put it up on YouTube, whoever owns the copyright they'll allow you to do it, but they'll monetize it so they get a little bit of money for everyone that watches it.
But they do not want this.
They totally took it down, and so that to me is a little bit fishy. But the way they did it there is they had a big spectacle of the rockets getting in. I mean, the astronauts getting into the rocket. And they put them in an elevator all the way down to the ground and hauled their butts out of there, you know, sometime between 30 seconds and 15 seconds to launch. So I think there's a good chance that they're doing that sort of thing in reality.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing with the shuttle. You know, obviously the shuttle just it's stuck to the top of a plane with some spindly little attachment legs. You know, this several ton vehicle is just sort of hanging on by what looks like 6 bolts. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but anyway, you know, it takes off and it goes somewhere and then it comes back. You know, who knows? It could be landing on some private island somewhere, and TikTok goes by, and then, you know, time to show up again. So, you know, I believed I believed that because, you know, I was young. I'm not going to say my age, and yes, you and I are fairly close, but at the same time, I did watch the moon landings on TV, and I questioned the whole time delay of, you know, there was hardly any delay of them talking from the moon down and from the space capsule down and so on, but then the whole Apollo program just sort of went quiet, and most of us grew up and just like, yeah, so what? So 5 minutes ago, that whole space thing, and then you know, it came back into my more immediate reference when I saw something that said, you know, it was all a hoax, and I started watching, and I was like, well, I'll be damned. And it pissed me off. But it didn't, you know, here's what's funny. It didn't piss me off. People talk about all the billions of dollars that have been dumped into this space program. I mean, now that I know that all money's fake anyway, that part doesn't really blow me away. It doesn't make me mad. I mean, it makes me mad, but that's not what makes me mad. It's the continuation of the cover-up that makes me mad. And that makes me want to, you know, pull their pants down around their ankles at some point and say, you know, you guys need a really bad spanking, because this is just wrong. And why would you need to punk people?
Bad astronaut.
Yeah, I mean, why would you need to punk people like that? What? You know, somebody somewhere along, I don't care what kind of NDA you signed, and I don't care what kind of death threats you got. You know, just come clean once and for all, and let's be done. Let's move on from this. Do you want to perpetuate, not only perpetuate the lie, but perpetuate the system that would support a lie like that? If you really are in, you know, all in on that, then not only shame on you, like your grandma would say shame on you, and like shame on you, but shame on you for making all the rest of us have to go through this crap. You know, don't even begin to believe that, oh, you look how much better your life is now. All of the technology that has been given to you to be used because of the space program and because of all of the, you know, behind the scenes, above top secret military experiments and military, what do you call it? There was a show on TV that they did. It was like called Eureka or something, where they showed a DARPA type agency that had these all these secret underground levels, and you know, the farther underground you went, the more top secret these experiments were, and they were creating all kinds of, you know, monstrous things that they, and the funding was coming from the military, the American, you know, U.S. military budget, because anything that they found, you know, okay, yeah, fine, it was a fiction show, but the premise is there that anything that they discovered, first and highest best use, was going to be snarfed up by the military for military use, okay? And so, yeah, do I believe that happens? Absolutely. Sure it does. I mean, why else do you think we have the biggest, strongest, most deadly military in the world, other than nukes, which don't exist?
Well, there's a big problem.
Why we've never used them. What?
If you go back to the days of Apollo, people didn't have these mobile phones with cameras on, and now virtually everybody has got one. So if they were flying these shuttles and dumping them in the sea somewhere, or landing them on an island somewhere, then some fishing boat somewhere is going to take a picture of it, and it will find its way into...
which is why they don't do it anymore.
So I think that virtually all of these launches now, they're all CGI, they're not real, and they're using a rent-a-crowd to say that these people are watching the launch. I mean, John says, yeah, you can go and see it, but have you actually been and seen live one of these launches yourself?
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you.
More recent?
I've been to, well, in the 90s, I went to Cape Canaveral to watch a rocket launch, and yeah. I think they're actually launching rockets, but my point is I don't think they're going to space and going to the moon. I think it would be really, really easy for them to launch a rocket up to beyond the point where you can see it anymore, and then the thrusters go out or whatever, and then that thing falls to the ground, and then 3 months later they just land something, and the whole time in between, they're essentially sending bogus telemetry data to all the scientists watching it, and the data works. Of course the data works, because they're just sending them the data they want them to believe, the data that describes their theoretical mission into space. So I think that, yeah, I think the best lie always contains a good element of truth. It has to, in order to be believable. But 10% lie makes the whole thing 100% false, for sure. But yeah, I don't know. They're physically launching rockets for sure, and probably even up to this day. They have to spend all that money on something and make it look credible. So yeah, rockets are pretty expensive, and they charge $500 for a hammer, so that gives you sort of an idea of how much the rest of it costs. I think the lunar rovers for the Apollo missions were $30 million each, so there's certainly money to be had there. And yeah, money is totally false, but as long as people have faith in the money, then it has value, even though it's a fiat currency. It still represents people's hard work, and it represents, tax dollars represent real people's money. So yeah, there's definitely some realness to it, but they're not going to space, because space, as we understand it, doesn't exist.
Lawrence,
Yeah.
think about those rooms full of those NASA data. Houston, we have a problem. What do you call that the control room?
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
know,
you got all these people sitting around in this control room, okay, and they're literally looking at screens, just like in Capricorn 1. The guy goes to his superior, sir, I have a problem with my, oh well, you're just getting some bad data, don't worry about it. But what? And then the next thing you know, this guy gets scurried out, and you're asking too many questions, and you're done. Okay. These people are sitting around in these control rooms looking at computer screens. Those feeds could be coming from anything, anywhere, some computer program that's running a simulation, and they wouldn't know the difference between a well pulled off simulation and a real rocket telemetry coming in from someplace. Okay,
So
they obviously didn't. Those people who were sitting there in Houston, the first moon landing, they thought what they were doing was real stuff. Those people weren't all complicit in a lie. They really believed that we were launching rockets to the moon with people in it.
So what about all these satellites? Because there's lots of companies out there that manufacture satellites that cost millions of dollars. What's happening to these satellites? Because they're not circling around us. What are they doing? Sticking it on the top of the rocket, launching it, and then just destroying it? That's crazy, isn't it?
Sure, I believe that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah, and the companies that manufacture these things, they're not going to complain, even if they knew the Earth wasn't a globe. They have jobs.
Yeah,
it would actually
it's the economy, stupid.
It would be
let's
illegal. It would be illegal for them not to accept the contracts, and actually, from a corporate standpoint, even if they stumbled on the fact that the Earth wasn't a globe, it would be illegal for them to say it, because it would ruin their business. And we all know a corporation's business has nothing to do with the truth. It has to do strictly with the bottom line. And so, Hollywood's made a business out of lying to us. Do you think Hollywood's going to come clean and say, well, half of the movies we ever made were fiction? Well, we already knew that, but yeah, sure.
Well, look at it this way. The people who are writing the contracts work over in this department, and the people who are reading the contracts for veracity work over in this department, and people who are signing the contracts work up here in this office. And none of these people communicate with each other except for little memos going back and forth. Did you get the contract? Sure, I got the contract. Did you pass it on to the guy in the office? Yes, I did. Okay, I'm done. Now I can get that out of my inbox and on to the next thing. And so that's how corporate structures are designed, to have that compartmentalization. The government works that way. Corporations work that way. Fascism is supported by that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in our common era, all power structures are built like the pyramid, with the the knowledge base and the control at the top, and then descending layers of people who get more and more compartmentalized and more totally oblivious to the actual fundamental goals of this body of power. And yeah, it's all across the board. It's everything. It's the military. It's corporations. It's I mean, you name it. Boy Scouts. And it's a model for control that works. That's why they use it, and I believe that's their infatuation with the undulated pyramid with the all-seeing eye over the top, because it fairly well shows their method. Right?
Well, and think about this too. When you have all these multinational corporations, I mean, that's the big thing. Multinational globalist corporations. Okay, the bigger they are, the more they control.
Pyramid. Sorry, I said undulated. I meant truncated pyramid.
That's okay. All right. So, you know, all the people in the food chain, which is what I call it, because that's what it seems like, you know, I'm bread, you're a vegetable, you know, blah, blah. All the people in the food chain, they're just happy to be doing their job. They're not going to rock the boat. And so not only that, but if you have something as big as the space program, for example, like NASA or ESA or RASA or any of those others that they're always talking about, or this private one, what's it called? Something SpaceX?
Yeah.
You know, the bottom line is produce something. It doesn't mean it has to be real. It just means it has to be produced. So whatever somebody's contracting someone to do, if I'm going to contract you to take a shuttle of replenishing stuff up to the ISS, okay, you're going to build a thing and your ship, and you're going to, you know, have a launch, and you're going to try to take it up there for real or for fake real, okay? You've got to go through the motions because we got to continue the cover-up of the lie. So you have to keep putting layers and layers of lies on there. And so, oh, we're so sorry, the thing blew up and lost 4 tons of replenishing stock materials. My mind's getting a little tired. And so, you know, we're going to have to try another mission.
A funny story about that, and you know, I never did verify it, but I know that if Jaron says something and proclaims something, that he's done the research and it's true. So I'll just say it with that caveat that this is what I believe took place, and you know, somebody can research and fill in the details. But on that Virgin SpaceX flight that was supposed to replenish the International Space Station primarily with vital foods and stuff that they needed to survive. It was also full of all of these little science experiments that were sent up there by like elementary students who wanted the astronauts to do all these little space experiments with their stuff, and so you know, that was sort of a shame. But isn't it sort of funny that their Virgin flight, they totally botch it and ruin everything and possibly put the astronauts in jeopardy? You know, what does that tell you? Shouldn't they have lost their contract? I mean, I've known people that got fired from a job for showing up a few minutes late. So right. Could you imagine, like, look at a police officer, could you imagine murdering someone at work and getting 2 weeks off with pay? Could you imagine being SpaceX and just totally, okay, so you get a job at a pizza place and you burn the place down on your first day. Do you think they're going to keep that job? No, you're going to get your ass canned, and unfortunately, these huge corporations that are involved in space just simply can do no wrong, and it's ridiculous.
Not only that, but I love that you brought up the fact that they engaged the children with this, with their, you know, their experiments that they sent up there, and now they'll remember that their whole lives, however many were involved in however many schools, and, you know, as broad as that ripple
that
of
makes
that reach.
That makes it real. Are you calling all those children liars?
Yeah. The children were involved in this, for gosh sakes, you know. Yeah. Oh God. So, you know, so when people say, you know, why don't you? What happened to you that you have such disdain and such, you know, distrust of the government? You know, what happened to you? It's like, are you kidding me? What do you mean, what happened to me?
Well, to me,
I started looking into what they said they were doing and what was actually happening, and go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, look at the definition of government. If you translate government, it literally means mind control. That's right. But all the governments is technically a tick on the ass of the people. That's it. They're not anything special. They're a tick on the ass of the people. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, what would you? I mean, when people say at this point, see, this is part of the timing, you know, like Lawrence says, how far back has this been going on? It's all inextricably tied. The growth of government is, you know, right on par and right in the same timeline, and dependence on government, you know, as all of these false missions and false stories and pyramid schemes these guys are building. You like the way I slipped that in there? And because think about, you know, people say, well, how would we build the roads? What are you talking about? People build the roads. People driving machines and somebody in offices saying, you're going to go here and you're going to do this, and, you know, an architect makes a plan and an engineer follows up, and, you know, these are all individual people who make that freaking road happen. Okay, all government does is talk to each other and go, I'll connect my end here and you connect your end there, and here's where the money's coming from, and here's where we're getting it, and here's where it's in, and that's all government does, along with a whole lot of added layers of money and revenue, you know, suckage and everything else to make happen what a bunch of people could get together and make happen. It's all about
totally. You know, I heard a great. Sorry, I was going to say, because I just, if I don't just spit out and say it, I forget. But I heard a great analogy that okay, so the government's in charge of building the roads, and people actually are the ones that build the roads. But the analogy would be the government is basically likened to giving yourself a blood transfusion from one arm to the other and spilling half of it in the process. It's totally unnecessary and it's wasteful. And in order to exist and become profitable, which is scary, but the government is very, very profitable, that they just have to be wasteful. That it's almost built into the whole design of the thing is whatever is wasted, and that's where you get things like a $500 hammer or a $30 million dune buggy on the moon. Yeah, that's because of government. They're just they're not efficient by design. They can't be efficient in order to fulfill or to have a need to exist. So, you know, I guess,
and to be self-perpetuating. Okay,
absolutely.
You have to bumble it so that you can also make people think that, you know, look how hard this is. We couldn't do this without the government. You know, this is hard. The government's making it hard. Okay, they're adding layers and layers and layers of you know, paperwork and organizational crap to make it take longer, to make it cost more money, and so on and so forth. And when people say, well, they're not doing that on purpose, really? Then why haven't, after all these hundreds of years in America, haven't they gotten any better at it? They've gotten worse at it. I mean, every time you turn around, there's a road project starting. I used to live in Indiana for years. I lived in you know, a small town that had Highway 41 going through it, okay, which is an interstate highway that connects a long way. You know, 41 comes down through my town I live in now again, and so it seemed like every summer the part of Highway 41 that came through our town was made out of concrete. It wasn't made out of blacktop, and they would come in and all the cones would go up down the one lane of the highway. It was just a 2-lane, 4-lane, 2 lanes each side, and all the yellow barrels would go all the way down through there, and they would cut up a little square, okay, and they'd, you know, jackhammer that out, and they'd pour new concrete in that little square. And then right down here, they'd cut up another little square, and they'd pour new concrete in that square. And next year, and then that would take almost all year, okay, and then the cones would all come up. You go, yay, the road's done. And then next year, they come back, and all the cones go back, and the square next to the square that they did last year, they cut that square up, and they, you know, pour that with new concrete. And this just kept happening instead of like dig up the whole freaking lane and relay however many miles of it that you can lay this year, and then lay the, keep, what is this?
Well,
Perpetual.
I'll tell you what it is, though. It's the contractors that are responsible for fulfilling these contracts know that if they keep their contract every year, the government is willing to pay more and more and more and more for the same thing. And so it's almost like they intentionally build wastes, like wastes of time. They build this sort of thing into their process because they're on the government dole. The government doesn't reward efficiency. It rewards inefficiency because, or rather, having a government contract rewards inefficiency because you're going to get more money for the same thing next year, so you might as well stretch it out. You might as well, to me, when you have a government with unlimited resources based on the backs of the working class people, it just becomes a huge problem of waste, and that's exactly why contractors will spend 5 years on a road, because they can. They've already got the contract. It's not like they're gonna lose their contract for being slow. They've already projected it was going to take 2 years, so they stand around with their thumb up their butt half the time, and they really do.
And they take part of that profit that they make off those road projects or whatever else, municipal or national, federal projects they work on, and they use that to elect the next guy that's going to make sure and keep giving them the contracts. And on top of that, all those guys that get elected, do they do their jobs? No. They all know that the lawyers who work for the lobbyists, for the corporations that run everything and own everything, they're going to be the ones that write all the laws, and they're going to, spoon feed you the law. Here you go. Now all you got to do is introduce this on the floor of the House.
And look at how
and they all go, oh, okay, well, that was easy. And they write it, to their benefit, obviously, on top of paying these, selected people millions of dollars to keep getting them elected.
Well, look how
it's a never-ending cycle, and that's where we are, and we're never going to get out of it as long as we believe and continue to believe that we have to have government, or there would be utter chaos.
And it's gotten to the point to where now, in allowing these corporate lobbyists to effectively write our laws, because all of the politicians owe them a favor, it has gotten so perverse that now corporations are considered constitutionally as people, and money is now considered free speech. And
Right.
If you sort of put two and two together with that, that's very scary, because now the richest corporation has more free speech than you, the individual, which is the opposite of a constitutional republic. It's very scary to me.
Not only that, but think about, this is the angle that they're using to go from a national organization of NASA control under the auspices of the U.S. military. That's who controls the purse strings. Actually, Congress funds money and everything, but that now because of not just their ineptitude, but because they need to make the switch from national to privatization. That's where these SpaceX people and Virgin Air and whatever else are going to come into play, and then it's going to be the same situation that the roads and everything else we just described. So we'd be idiots to let that happen, but yet everybody's just saying, rolling over and
look at the prisons here in America. It costs something like $50,000 to $70,000 a year to house a single prisoner each year. And if you really add up what they're providing for them, it doesn't add up, and it's just a huge amounts of government waste and basically ripping us off by imprisoning the people. And a lot of people are in prison for some stupid crap, and a lot of people are sitting in prison innocent. But yeah, I mean, how could it possibly cost that much money to keep each inmate housed in prison? Well, when you look at what they're doing, it's awful. And of course, now you've got the privatization of prisons, to where you've got corporations that know, God dang, we can get $50,000 to $70,000 a year per person, and it only costs us couple $1,000s ostensibly per year. So there's a huge profit margin involved with imprisoning each and every one of you out there, and that's another thing. I mean, this society is going in terrible wrong directions all over the place.
So at the end of the day, we're running up on 3 hours. We have 10 minutes, and at the end of the day, and I want to try to cut this off early so we don't lose the show like we lost last week, because that really sucked. So let's wrap this up with what are we going to do, since we spent the biggest part of this show, of the first hour or so, on the map issue, okay, and the model issue. Who's going to be the take responsibility and be ready to be fired upon, I'm sure. Who's going to take responsibility to create the dialogue about this, about a proper map, about a proper model, and something where the map and the model actually work together, as well as the AE map and the DOME model work together, and just see if we can come up with something. Because I know there's people that just heard me say that who are going to say, well, if the map and the model work together, then what's wrong with it? Why don't we go with it? What's the matter with it? We spent the whole first hour talking about what's wrong with it. There's lots of things wrong with it. So it's obviously not perfect, and it needs to be maybe completely thrown out, maybe not. I don't know. What do you propose? What do you guys propose that we introduce into the conversation about that?
Don't worry. The smart guys at NASA will figure it out. We'll just let them do it.
Yeah, right. There we go.
Somebody's going to pick it up and run with it, Laurie, who's got some good computer modeling skills. Somebody's going to grasp the correct reality that we're in. The only problem with it is it might be too technically scientific for most people to accept, because it will probably involve things that are beyond our understanding of how it's possible to do that.
Well, and that's one thing that definitely works for the AE map and the circling model, because it's so simple in its makeup, and its whole concept, that it's pretty easy for people to wrap their minds around, even though some people have a really hard time wrapping their minds around, the sun goes around the Tropic of Cancer in the spring in the northern hemisphere, and then around the equator, and then it goes on this bigger circle on the outside.
If I'm correct,
obviously having to go faster to make up the same amount of time as it's doing in the Tropic of Cancer. So there's issues. Something needs to be explained there, but it's also about you can't navigate using the AE map. People are trying to make it work by doing these long haul flight videos and these mapping videos. So there is something to the flight patterns, okay, jumping up here and coming back over there that don't seem to make any sense. But
that flight that's from Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia, if you look at if you drew a line between the two, it goes quite close to the pole, so it's not quite going through the center point, so it does look accurate on the AE map. But I've looked at other routes and they're not accurate. They're all over the place in the southern hemisphere. Like from the UK to Australia, they're going via India and China, and that isn't the most direct route. They're going way out of their what's-its. It's just a coincidence that Santiago, Chile to Australia one flies close to the center, and maybe that's why they've picked that one, to throw us off the trail.
Okay, so the challenge is for a map and a model that both work together based on what we observe, not just data coming from government agencies and corporations and the globalists, because they're putting out data that works for their model. That I can be assured of, because their model doesn't work with the data. The data works with the model. That's what I feel confident about. Okay, so they're hijacking us somehow with this data. Okay, and that's what I feel. If I'm wrong, then I hope somebody proves me wrong. I put out a proof challenge today. Prove the dome to me. Prove the dome. I don't think there is one, the shape that people say, but if it is, I'm willing to embrace it if somebody comes up with proofs like the proofs that I've seen with my own eyes for flatness. Okay, I've seen it. You don't have to prove that to me anymore. But things like the dome, things like the AE map, things like the AE model of spinning things, you don't have, you have to show me how that works with real observation, and the way to do that, I believe, is to set up a system of people on the ground observing with film, cameras, timepieces, what direction did it come from, compasses, all that stuff. We have to collect our own data. And if someone's willing to, if somebody's going to tell me, well, why are you doing all that? It's like an exercise in futility. We can just dial it up on the internet. Okay, that's why. Because
I don't think there's an edge at all. I think if you got to Antarctica and kept going, there would be no edge. I'm not saying it's an infinite plane. I think if you went to the North Pole, carried on walking, you could end up coming out of the South Pole. And the same with the oceans. If you carried on saying east-west, I think you could end up back where you started. And how that works.
You said that you could go to the North Pole and keep on going and come out the South Pole. That's one of the things that I've never seen anybody show that they've done. Nobody has polar circumnavigated the world.
You can.
Have they?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that's right. Nobody has. It's always east to west.
Okay.
Maybe that's why they don't want you to go. Maybe if you did go there and you managed to walk all the way across and you came out on the other side, it would upset them.
Okay, so thanks you guys again for coming on with me, and let's keep the conversation going, and let's continue to give people things to think about. That's what my hope is for this couple of hours we do every week, is to just keep giving people things to think about. I'm not trying to shake up the world, and I'm not trying to confuse anyone. Now I know neither of you guys are either, but the only way we're ever going to really get to the bottom of the truth is to throw out all the garbage, and that's what I hope we're attempting to do here.
Yeah, so keep asking questions. People don't like it. It's tough, but the questions have to be asked. If something doesn't add up to me, I'm just going to ask the question, and if it upsets somebody, so be it. But all I want to see is the truth.
Well, if my blood pressure goes up, I can get it back down again. I can just get in a little Zen moment, and and if Jonathan gets upset, he can just outburst, with his ADD. And I gotta say this right now. I can't wait because this is it right now. I'll forget. And I'm like that all the time too. So we do our best. I think for all of us having ADD, we talk over each other.
Come on and tell us about the stars. John LeBon, and I may agree with him, John LeBon thinks the stars are sentient beings and they affect all our emotions. And,
I don't. I can't disagree with that. I have no evidence to disagree with that, and it's as possible as anything else is possible.
Well, John Skyped me and he told me he's watching. So John, come on the show and tell us about the stars, because I find it fascinating.
I'll have that conversation too with you, John.
I'm an Aquarius, and you're a Taurus.
I'm a Taurus. I'm a bullhead. But I can listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching.
Later.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.